This is a sort of preemption, because I know I'm going to get this comment, oh, this drama's 88 days old, why are you still harping on it? Because somebody has to call this out. I have now reacted to this video 3 times, and each time I get more angrier. So, here's the 4th, alright? Everyone fucking strap in, because I'm not playing around anymore. He's an ignorant man just spouting off abuse online. That's all he's doing. And we shouldn't support people like this. This is bread burning. We should not be supporting people like this. I'm sorry. What's up everybody, and welcome back to another Pro Hammer video. Today we're again talking about stop killing games. I promise you, this is the last time. Unless someone makes videos with different information coming out, this will be the sort of last time that I'm sort of talking about this, because I'm not here to like milk it or do these things for views or anything like that. I want to sort of come to you openly. I've seen Thors videos, and I've seen Theo's videos, and I've seen Primeagens videos, and I feel as if I could have kind of taken bits from each and done a better like video on the whole thing, which is what I'm doing today. So if you're done with this, if you're not really caring about the drama anymore, if you haven't seen Thors videos and Theo's videos and Primeagens videos, then stick around, because we're going to talk about all of that today. So first of all, I think it's really important to preface this whole thing by setting out what it is that people are trying to do and what it is that the EU initiative this has all been done through is actually for. Stop Killing Games is an EU initiative seeking to ensure that if video games are going to be shut down or studios facing problems of some kind, that there's a suitable end-of-life plan for consumers to keep playing the game they have published or they have purchased. What does that mean? This means, in the grand scheme of things, when you're designing software as a software engineer, that you'll be baking these plans into making your game that exists right now. The problem is, this goes up against established business practices and typical rules of the industry. See, it's rather normal for software not to be bought and owned, but licensed perpetually, with the IP owner having complete rights to revoke your access for whatever reason. That tends to come when you agree with like end user license agreements and terms of service and stuff like that. So Thor's videos, he mentioned that it was good because you could ban cheaters, which it is, but at the end of the day a private company still has the right to tell you what it is that you're doing with the thing that you supposedly bought, when, as we know, it's a perpetual license, you're not actually buying it. If you try and compare it with normal items that you might physically own, it's like having a dishwasher, using an alternative soap, and they disable it so you can't use it anymore, as you've now been banned from using their dishwashers. It's pretty rotten. I don't agree with any of it, and I don't think it should, frankly, exist in the current way it does just now. That's my personal opinion. But Stop Killing Games doesn't really seek to do that. Now, in terms of Stop Killing Games, you can take a look at their own website. You can see here they have an FAQ, you can go through it, how are publishers destroying video games. We're seeing an increased number of video games designed to run on a server that the publisher controls in order for the game to function, right? So we can kind of go through this at a sort of top level and go, alright, what is it that Stop Killing Games actually intends to do? So how is this campaign going to save video games? If companies face penalties for destroying copies of games they have sold, this is very likely to start curbing this behaviour. If a company is forced to allow consumers to retain their games in even one country, implementing those fixed worldwide becomes a trivial issue for them. And it might, but as we've seen with GDPR legislation, that's not necessarily the case, but we'll continue. So if destroying a game you paid for became illegal in France, companies that patched the game would likely face the same patch worldwide, blah 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 blah. We get it. Australia did this with Valve for refunds. So the conversation we're having today is, what does Stop Killing Games intend to do for games? So like MMORPGs. What about large-scale MMORPGs? Isn't it impossible for the customer to run those when the servers are shut down? And by the way, I would recommend going to the actual Stop Killing Games website so you can see their view on it. My interpretation of it is my interpretation, and also my biases for what I like to see happen in the games industry. Accursed Farms has a list of things that he would concede on that actually some other members of SKG would be far more radical on. So, you know, this is a discussion, and this is the point of these videos. We're here to discuss the topic, not put our fingers in our ears and say we know best. So, just getting that out of the way. What I say isn't necessarily the position of anybody on this. So what we're going to do with this segment of the video is do a pretty deep dive on Thor. And it's him exclusively that we're kind of going to be going over again. And I know I've already done part 1 and part 2 of reacting to his videos, but what I've done, if you can see over on the left side of my screen, is effectively make notes on a lot of his positions and a lot of his points in the videos that he did. One of the problems I have with React content the way it is, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, is you don't really see the person doing a lot of research or note taking or going away to see what it is that this thing does and looking at the fact and looking at the all accursed farm videos. And that thing's been brought up to death, right? We know all of that. What I'm going to do is go through each point that Thor has raised and try and refute that with something of my own experience. Now, I want to sort of re-harp on what Thor said in his second video, and what he always says throughout a lot of the points he makes. This guy is an industry veteran. He's been here for 20 years. He's worked for Blizzard during its glory days, StarCraft 2, some of the best World of Warcraft expansions. He's a security tester. Like, as he says in his own words, this is his wheelhouse. We should be looking to him to go, alright, can you please fill us in a conversation from a game dev perspective on how this should go? The problem I have is that I, as a web developer who knows jack shit about this area, can so easily refute the points he's making. And I feel like I'm going crazy because whenever I rewatch these videos, and this was only 7 days ago, I just get angry again. Because I'm sitting there going, how is it that this guy is now being effectively enabled by Theo and the Primeagen? And with all due respect to both of those creators, I want to keep reiterating this as well, they had different points here and there, which we'll get into when we do their deep dives. So let's just focus on Thor just now, and we'll do this for each creator, and we'll try and land on a position that all three of them have, and see how it lines up with each other, because I think you'd be surprised. So, to start out, we are stating the initiative isn't law, it's something that you put up to lawmakers to start a discussion. He doesn't believe this initiative starts the correct conversation. If we want to stop developers building a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience and then taking away support in the future, this isn't it. This isn't always possible in all video games. It's too vague and will damage all live services, and he believes this would result in League of Legends needing to be re-architected from a client-server game into a client-to-client game, similar to a peer-to-peer experience. Importantly, he uses this as an example as to why this wouldn't work for all games, so that's coming back to one of his points. So it's really important when someone makes a point and makes an argument and then gives you an example, you refute that example, because now you need another example for that main point to exist. Otherwise, he's just saying things without any evidence, without any source, and we just have to believe it because he has 20 years of experience, when our eyes and ears are telling us differently. So he uses the League of Legends example as a reason as to why they couldn't release server binaries or whatever, or why this law wouldn't work for all games, when we know it would. All League of Legends would have to do is simply release the server binaries. And for those that say they can't do that, they literally have league tournaments where the games are offline. Like, they have these things already built. Don't worry about it. And that's my problem. It took me 2 days, a day, if that. I had comments coming in on my video informing me about the League of Legends situation, which then allowed me to go and research that, by the way, when it comes to these tournaments and LANs, they do have this different League of Legends experience that they probably could roll out to customers if the game ever went away. Does Thor know that? And I would ask him that question. Did he know that? And if he didn't know that, I think it's extremely dangerous for him to be commenting on issues he doesn't know about. He doesn't know about it. And if he did know about it, I would ask him why that doesn't apply. That why would you think that it would need to be re-architected? When I hear a game developer saying that, someone in the industry has been here for 20 years, they should know better. This is not a position you can take. As a software engineer, if I'm building a game, and I have components of it, that need to be up in AWS, needs to interact with this service and that service, I can pretty much give you the blueprints of how you can get that set up on your own instances. You join accounts, you need to fiddle with configs and get things to build in a certain way and get things to deploy in a certain way. I can pretty much give you the blueprint as to how that would work, and Lewis Horsemen touched on this quite well in his video. So either Thor's been disingenuous or he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I don't know which one it is, because if I say he's been disingenuous, that leads me to believe that he's on purpose doing this for some kind of reason, and a lot of the community speculated this was on a live service because he's making his own game. But apparently that has nothing to do with it, and it's just a basic conspiracy. So then he has to not know what he's talking about, which then makes us go back into the initial conversation of this React content is brain-rotten people. You have people with far too much credentials talking on things they haven't researched and haven't looked up, and I think that's quite dangerous. So we'll keep going through his points, and on that, studios have already released server-client projects before. You have numerous games that have came out, from the Battlefield series to the old Call of Duties, Black Ops 3, dedicated servers being released for that. That's a server client model. Games have already been reverse engineered. For example, World of Warcraft servers. This has already been done. The initiative doesn't call for the server client game to be made. He's just making that up. Like, that whole concept about League of Legends has to be changed. When he's reading, he has the wording in front of him, and it says the game has to be left in a functional, playable state. He reads that and goes, you need to remake the game as a completely different single-player project. Who asked for that? The initiative isn't calling for that. And him saying it's vague, to me, just says he doesn't understand it. To me. He doesn't understand the EU initiative process. Again, Accursed Farms released a FAQ for this, which states quite clearly that this is the expected process. If you have a problem with people smoking at a certain place in the country, in all EU countries, and you want to put forward a ban on that, but you don't know how bus stops or cigarettes are invented or created, that's not a big deal. You don't know how smoke inhalation in regards to a study might corrupt things or like affect you personally. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. That's what the lawmakers are there for, and then their ties to the lobbyists into the games industry. And this is the thing. He makes this point at some point in like his second video as well, where he says game developers aren't being included in the conversation. Is he not aware how law is drafted? Game developers will be included in this conversation from day one when this eventually gets into the sort of EU process and the lobbyists, and when it's finally starting to be worded into legislation that makes sense. He either doesn't understand what an initiative is, or is given this whole process far too much credit than what it's worth. It's simply asking lawmakers to have a look at it, and we just spoke about that. Anyway, we're going to keep firing through, quite rapid fire. So he says, we're dealing with government here, and if we're going to be putting this in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues. Despite that, he hasn't done the investigation into what an initiative is, and his astounding lack of research. It's quite hypocritical to say that, you know? He says these are people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, and again, Ross Scott says that, and is told that he's disgusting for saying that, because of course politicians won't understand billion-dollar industries. Yeah, lawmakers won't understand the nuance of the industry. That's why they typically have experts and advisors that inform them. He says he can't agree with it because effectively the initiative is too vague, government might not be fully up to speed on what the real problem is, and a misconception about what endgame results would be required for gamers. So the initiative is too vague, government might not be fully up to speed on it. Yeah, so he's effectively saying that he can't agree with it because the initiative is too vague, the government might not be fully up to speed on it, or on what the real problem is, and he has a misconception about what the endgame results would be required for games. So he's talking about League of Legends being recreated. Like, he's not understanding how the EU process works, he's not understanding what this initiative seeks to do, he's not understanding from a game developer perspective what would be required for games to release. This would only affect new software have been developed probably after like 2030. So that'd be starting from the development process. Like, software would be developed with this in mind. We're not talking about converting League of Legends to a single player experience. That's not happening. He doesn't understand. With all of these things, you kind of have to ask, what's his solution? So his solution is, what we should be doing is calling out companies which create single player games, make them live service, requiring online connectivity. So that's effectively a lot of games, like The Crew. It has a single player component, but it's a live service, which means it has multiplayer kind of baked into it, which it does. You can drive about and see other cars, and you're kind of being sold that as a multiplayer experience when you don't really need it to be. Again, I've spoken to people that have played The Crew. They state that there is a single player mode in it, and it could function without multiplayer. He also mentions at this point that games shutting down after 10 years for live service was normal. He doesn't really have a problem with that, and also says it's rare for a single player game, to have this live service element bolted to it. So things like The Crew could happen to them. He also says it's rare for a game, like a single player game, to have this live service element bolted to it. And what I've done is research a list of games this has happened to, and well, what I did first was look at Theo's video on this, because he goes through a list of games and says all of them are perfectly fine and don't have this problem, despite the one he referenced and went into detail on, which we'll get into in his section, requiring Denuvo, which is an online DRM check. If the company goes out of business and isn't paying their Denuvo bill, or some aspect of that, how are you activating your software? This happened years ago with the one of those Sony like digital locker predictions, secure your ROM or something like that. Games these days have to be cracked in order to play them to some effect. You're misquoting it, but that's effectively what's happened. I think those games count too. To say that games are single player despite requiring an online only connection, blah 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 blah, I don't think is is a rarity. I think most games are like that these days, especially for like, do you remember when the Xbox One, when that was first being toyed as a concept, or when that first released, it required an online-only connection, and you had to connect it every couple of days, and even then for some games you still have to do that. Like, this is happening. This is the problem. I think Thor knows this. He's just not sitting down and engaging with it in a research-based manner. He's just letting the neurons fire, like a sea of just misinformation. He alludes that since the game has had a sequel, it was fine to shut down. So we have a live service game that was released in 2014, you know, those games that may be updated and continuously patched. The sequel comes out 4 years later, effectively killing it, which is in 2018, and then Ubisoft used that as a reason to kill the original game because everyone's moved over to the second one. Why was it a live service game if you're just going to release sequels? Like, and that's a 4-year time span, so when the second game was probably being made, the first game had just been released. You know, game development timelines can be from about 4 to 6 years, especially for a AAA studio. Sometimes more. Look at GTA 6. The crew's not as big as that, but you get me. Sequels does not equal retaining your purchase as well. Like, I think we just need to say that. Just because a sequel came out doesn't mean that you're not being forced to buy the game again, effectively. Like, that's the way I see it. If the crew comes out and there's 10 people playing it because they just released a second one, I find that that's like a planned obsolescence, if you get what I mean. They're releasing products with the intention that everyone moves over to the second one, and now they can kill off your one, which I don't think is very fair. Especially in a sort of live service arena, I wouldn't be opposed to some kind of legislation, and this would be gotten around so easily by game studios, but I think it would really take the mask off, to be frank. Like, if they have a live service game and the quota is that, again, they could just change the language for it, that they can't just release another game. Like, you have a live service game, you need to support it effectively. He says this point, you can't run a live service on this few players. So I've dug into this to figure out what this means. If the crew had 12 million daily players, then the argument could be that they obviously wouldn't have got rid of the game because they just would have kept the store stocked with stuff to make people buy it. But that's assuming people buy it. The more people you have in your game, the more it costs, especially if in some essence you're not paying for it. You're not getting any more money for it. Let's use the crews as an example. You know, had about 60 players on it when it ended, probably even less than that. But if 5,000 of those came back to play the game on a day-to-day basis because they liked it, should it have been shut down? What's the limit? That's like my point. What's the limit as to which a game studio can just shut down a game? Because they can do it both ways. There's too many people playing this, not enough people buying it or buying microtransactions, so we need to shut it down. And on the other end, there's not enough people playing this, so because there's not enough people playing this, and we're just paying for infrastructure that no one's using, we're just going to get rid of it. So it's both. They can do both. Do you get me? At this point in the video, he mentions again this weird example about carving off single player into its own thing requiring developer time. Again, just completely misunderstanding what the initiative seeks to do. He mentions there's 2 ideologies between gamers and game developers. I just don't think that's a good place to be. Like, it's just not a good place for the industry to be whatsoever. Like, the people that are making the games are butting heads with the people that are buying the games. Like, the market decides what the market wants. If you as a game developer are making things that nobody wants, you're not going to get any sales. But if you're making software that people want and moaning about it, if gamers want more regulation because they're sick of being ripped off by game developers, how is that a difference in ideology? That's just, of course, one camp's going to want to be treated well. That's how these things work. Game developers should be seeking enhancements in their employment law. Gamers are consumers. They should be seeking enhancements in their consumer law. That's just the difference in ideology. One works, one consumes. Like, you both have different goals, but they should somewhere align to create a product that everyone likes. He then proceeds to misconstrue the argument and then ends up with live service games being run forever or don't make it a whole scenario. He says it will miss out on games like Final Fantasy XIV and League of Legends. Phone games won't exist anymore, which I think is just fear-mongering. I don't know where he has a basis for any of that. Live service games, if I'm not wrong, is $1 billion industry. I think it probably makes up most of the revenue of the gaming industry at this point in time. The amount of microtransactions EA can get from something like FIFA, which is a live service game, is astounding. It would make your eyes water. And he now thinks that because EA would have to provide the server code for that so someone could still battle someone on FIFA 21 Ultimate Team, it's just nonsense, really. There's no way they would give up on billions for the sake of a server, like IP thing that you can connect to. Absolutely no way. And the thing is, that's me refuting that, okay? I'm saying there's no way that they would miss out on the billions of revenue for that. But Thor would just say, well, I have more experience in that, and that's my argument. But he's the one that's he's disputing it. He has to come with more than just, I don't think it'll work that way. You have to reference it. Get us a game studio on the line that would say, get us Final Fantasy XIV, League of Legends, something like that. I wouldn't have made this game if this law existed. And maybe then we'll take it with some sort of credence that it's true. But he doesn't have any sources or anything. He's just saying what's on his mind. Again, he reiterates the law can't be vague, has to be specific. This initiative, he keeps coming back around to this point throughout the whole video, when again it's an initiative, he's just not understood the process. So he believes that this initiative should only relate to companies that make a game, they shove live service in it for the sake of it, and it doesn't add anything to the experience. Like, how do you even make a law against that? That's like more vague than what this is. And even I don't think it's that vague at all. We're talking about making sure games can still function after the supposed shutdown of the studio or the server shutdown or whatever else. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't run like binaries and server code on your own machine. And we have plenty of examples of game studios and publishers which have released dedicated server tools for their games. If we're talking about, yes, but games these days can't do that because they license out certain aspects of the engine, then when they design the game they won't do that anymore. Do you think that those industries, that those software developers that license out aspects of their engine are gonna tell them they can't distribute server code when it's the law to do so? They wouldn't have any customers. They would have to accept the changes. What are we talking about here? We're just talking about this made up world, I feel like, where the law doesn't apply, like, throughout the chain. We're talking about the chain of game development. From a game developer with 20 years experience in the sort of industry, 7 years making his own indie projects, he should know this. If he's ever went to license a bit of software, and it's, I don't know, they tell him, you can't use this in X way, when that's completely illegal, like, he has way more recourse there. Or that developer just wouldn't get any sales. I don't understand his point with that. He says it's absurd that politicians don't like easy wins and don't care about the multi-billion-dollar games industry. So I've had chat with politicians around here in Scotland, which hosts Rockstar Games in Edinburgh. Dundee is one of the two. I always forget which one. I swear they moved at some point. And yeah, politicians don't know about the games industry. They'll say that, you know, culture, audio, music, TV, movies, games are all like important industries, and they are, but I don't think they're that involved in it outside of things like phone games and stuff like that. I think he really did make a mountain out of a molehill for this, and I went into him a little bit on my last video on it, so if you want to see that, you can go back into that one and see. But I really just think he's being just quite childish when it comes to this argument, and that's me being quite, as a personal attack against him, but he personally attacked the character of Accursed Farms as well, so I'm trying to steer away from that sort of personal attacks. I don't want this video just to dive into that sort of rhetoric. Again, repeating it's too vague of an idea, despite Accursed Farms saying the law is already unclear on it. So Thor's position on this is seemingly to just remain with the unclear law and forget any attempts to change it, except for the very limited number of games seemingly that Thor has decided should have regulations, which he calls very rare, those being the ones that should have license changes. So instead of it being, you can buy this game, you're now buying a license for the game, or you're now renting this game effectively for a set time period. And yeah, I think that'd be good for informing the customer, but when that is the customer's only option, is renting, then all they can do is rent. It's like having Blockbuster be the only store outside their neighbourhood with no access to online stores and going, you have options. You don't. It's a monopoly. You only have one. Like, what do you mean? I don't know. The concept of monopoly is not applying to this, but I'm pretty sure you can use your brain and deduce that having one method of buying a game isn't fixing the problem. People still have to buy it or get a license anyway. The consumer's not benefiting from that. They're just being told up front that they're getting wrecked. Thor says it's a huge risk despite the current state of the games industry. Like, I don't know how we can look at the current state of the industry and think it's going well. Like, he's living under a rock if he thinks that. I don't think he is. He refutes any argument of buying something and keeping it with a cop-out answer of you're buying a license that says so in the terms of service. I just kind of refuse to like engage with that rhetoric. Like, if he thinks that's an appropriate method of owning software to like this extent, like owning a copy of something, I don't think that's right. I think IP holders need to be protected so that when you buy a copy, you can't just copy it and release it to everybody and do all this, that, and whatever else. And I think his fear-mongering around they're buying a license when you could just tie the license to the online account rather than necessarily, like for example, if you made an account with that service and then you sort of registered the game with that authentication service, and then you could have other authentication services so you could play on your own servers and stuff like that whenever the game shuts down. I think it's still a way of like keeping anti-cheat mechanisms. But what I'll say is the games industry has dropped the ball massively on the state of anti-cheat. I don't think we're in a suitable place for that whatsoever. The bad situation that we're currently already in doesn't outweigh the potential good of this one. And even then, I don't think it affects it. Because you're still going to have to log in, you're still going to have to register to play on these accounts and services, and you're still going to get banned, even if you don't have a license anymore, and it's just a copy of the game. I don't know what changes there. And again, I could be being ignorant on it, in terms of the legality, but that's why we're talking about making a law to change it. He agrees that the wording around banning a game should change, so instead of it saying that you're buying a license up front, we've already mentioned that. However, he says the initiative isn't trying to do that. It's vague BS, whereas calling out the wording like companies use would be a better thing to do. And again, I just don't think that solves any of the problems of games preservation. Says the tactics and language used by Across Farms are disgusting. Across Farms is stating that politicians like easy wins, and it diverts from more serious matters, which I think is human nature. I think if you go into work one day and you have some easy things that you can do over a big pack of paperwork, you're going to do the easy stuff first before you start tackling the big stuff. Unless you're a bit different and you like doing the big stuff before you tackle the easy stuff. Some people like to do it the other way around. Someone that did social engineering, probably, as a offensive hacker, I think he would understand human nature a bit more than what he's currently perceived to. He proceeds to say, politicians don't care about the industry. Do you think the government wouldn't be meticulously looking through this for the global industry? Which is it? You can't say it's too vague and damaging, and then say politicians won't understand nuance, and then say the government is meticulous for details. It's just like a complete flip-flop of all the details. Like this point that he's harping on that politicians don't know, also do know, and you're being offensive to say they don't, and also are meticulous. Jesus, he's just going between all three camps on this one problem in the space of a 15-minute video. And the assertion that he's not going to change his stance on this because I'm a dev and a player, he believes the problem is around wording when you buy a game, and apparently the rare amount that exist. So the ones that he's saying are the problem, and even if we say it isn't limited to that subsection, even if he believes it's all licensing for games, how does that fix the problem? I don't think it does. Because he's going from a position of when the user buys a game, they aren't being informed of what their true consumer rights are. So what we need to do is tell them, so now they know. But nothing else changes. But thanks, now I'm being informed I'm being screwed over, but I still can't do anything about it, other than vote with my wallet and never buy games again, which affects him in this industry. Like, how does he think that won't be damaging to the games industry? Being told you're renting everything, being told you're buying a license for everything. That's way more damaging in my eyes than just fixing the problems with game ownership. Like, why wouldn't you fix the core problem rather than just put a band-aid on language? Steam could do this tomorrow. You don't need the EU to put a different buy button in. It's just lazy, man. It's lazy. It doesn't want to think about the problem. It doesn't want to tackle this head on. He's put a 15-minute video out on just nothing. There's nothing being added here to the conversation. So we're going to go through the second video now, and again, I know that we're battering through this, but we need to understand Thor's position and land on a sort of central theme of his argument. So in the second video, we got a lot of praise from developers from his original video. It says the analytics show a healthy like the dislike ratio, but doesn't show this. I checked his Twitter, couldn't see any pictures of him sharing the analytics of it, so we just have to take his word on how good it was perceived. Despite the 800,000 views and the 63,000 likes, I presume there's a big imbalance there. And if I scroll down, there's also 16,000 comments, so I don't believe that. He says, what happens if a game is an only live service game? Devs either have to release server binaries or carve off the game in some way that makes it single player only. Again, I don't really agree with that. It doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world to get server binaries because it leaves developers open to abuse, despite this being a practice that's already existed for years, for decades. He uses an example where you can abuse a developer to run them out of business to the point whereby they are forced to release their server code, allowing you to now run those servers and profit off something the developer couldn't. He references a Valve problem with TF2 bots disingenuously. This was affecting matchmaking, which was the official Valve experience, not the community servers. The fact that the game had community servers saved the game. Like, you can't take a good point about game servers like being in the hands of the players, and then use that to back up your argument. Like, yes, this problem exists, but the fact that community servers existed meant the game could still be played. So people could still get sales. So you could still buy and sell the game and have point shops and whatever else. And have microtransactions and hats being sold in a market. You can't use that point. And this, again, is harping on to my original point. That Thor's either being extremely disingenuous because he has some kind of agenda, or he hasn't researched any of this. Which means he's simply just reacting to the top firing neurons in his brain, which is not good for someone of this stature in the community. I need to reiterate that. He has not read the article that he has cited. If he did, he wouldn't have used it. Not in this argument. I can get what he's saying, but you can't use that as a source. So now we go back to the original point. Alright? The source that you used wasn't appropriate. So now your original point's pretty much mute because he's just rabbiting on and waffling about something that doesn't actually happen ever in the world. He has no real life examples where this has ever happened. He also states verbatim, I can kill off your company and now nobody can come after me. This is an offensive security tester seemingly being unaware of the various laws which are exactly what he's talking about. The Computer Misuse Act. If you DDoS a bunch of servers, you can report that to the relevant authorities, whether it be the police or some kind of I think we have the Computer Crime Agency or something like that here in the UK. You report the issue to them and they'll look into it. You can report these kind of things to the providers that are providing these DDoS attacks. So if you notice that the IP addresses are coming from DigitalOcean, you can report that as abuse and they'll typically take it down. And you can take it further as well. It's illegal to do what he's doing. It's illegal to do what he's talking about. I don't know how we can get away with this point. Nobody can come after me. What? As in, bring down a company and then sneakily just get away with it and then start hosting the server just randomly one day? You don't think that's a little bit suspicious? I think that's just an incredible argument that just can't be taken seriously. I don't know how that works in the real world. The initiative makes it very hard to build and maintain live service games, which is why I'm bringing this all up. And despite this, the dude has used one example of an extreme situation so far and his entire reason why it's against it. And bearing in mind, this reason did not exist in the first video. So he's just made this up completely in the second video. There'll be less incentive to build these games despite it being an extremely lucrative industry. His source, just trust what he says. Thor seemingly believes due to the reference of Final Fantasy XIV and League that the game wouldn't have been created under this initiative. Which again is something I just completely disagree with. There's no reason why those games couldn't be produced and then some kind of end-of-life plan implemented at some point. Thor effectively believes that the act of preserving a game without the social aspect of it being there is pointless, and I will refer to a tweet that he actually produced. And yes, I'm going through my notes, so you can probably pause and see all the stuff I've written, feel free. So Thor claiming we're not talking about asset preservation, instead it's experience preservation. So if I bring up this imager, and I hope you can see that, here it is here, and I'll read it out verbatim. It's most definitely still preservation, and we're talking about like Apex Legends, that kind of thing, in terms of the societal impact of these games. But it doesn't capture the point of the experience. As an example, Helldivers 2, a live service game, has an ongoing narrative and live DM that changes the narrative daily. I think it's a live dungeon master for players to experience. So when you log into Helldivers, it's a good chance that things will change, this will change, blah blah blah. And that's part of the live experience, which is great. I love that about the game. Preserving a game would not preserve that experience and would then just be about asset preservation. The argument I make here is that this doesn't fit the request from the community to preserve the game. Because you haven't done the research. Because you don't know. You haven't read it, my man. I don't know if this time is done for like my time or his time. This was at 2 AM. So it might have been around 8 o'clock his time. But why is he not looking into this? The argument I make here is that this doesn't fit the request from the community to preserve the game. Says who? The fact that I've went through his arguments and each bit by bit, and refuted nearly everything he's said and pointed to the misinformation he has, doesn't mean that he's fit to understand what the community wants, especially when the community and gamers are so against what he wants. He said it himself, there's two different ideologies and he's on the ideology of the game developers. So how does he understand what the community wants when he doesn't even agree with them? Asset preservation is not an experience preservation. But the whole act of having private servers and having those World of Warcraft experiences is their own experience. That being said, if the intention is just to preserve the assets, they can always get behind that. But that isn't what we're talking about, despite it being so. This is what I'm saying. I fully believe these guys do not understand what they're talking about. He's for asset preservation. He's for snapshotting a game and just keeping it there in time. But he doesn't understand that's what people are asking for. Because he's not read or talked about it. And I think him shutting himself away and not having this conversation and declaring he's not going to change his mind on this is dangerous. We've just seen a little slip there. That being said, if the intention is to just preserve the assets, then I can always get behind that. He can get behind that. So the Helldivers 2, if it's just a preservation of the game, in terms of the assets, in terms of being able to at least go on as a 4-person team and just play it, just the way it is, snapshotted in that sort of time frame, like Vanilla WoW. People wanted an asset preservation of Vanilla WoW because they hated the next expansions that came out after it. Like, people have been giving him these examples and he's just hand-waved it away, despite it being core to the argument. You need to understand this. We just spoke about his reference to it. So private servers aren't a route because he believes fully that the avenue for abuse is so high that it's not worth it. So that's that example he gave before that I just can't get on board with. That example where he has absolutely no supporting evidence for it whatsoever. So we can't take that in good faith. He's not arguing in good faith here because he knows fine well that argument has nothing to do with this. He's not going to wait and see what happens with this because the start of the conversation doesn't make sense to him because he doesn't understand it. Unfortunately, I very much doubt he's read any of the supporting articles on this or any of the previous videos. And I said this in my initial video, unfortunately I'm kind of repeating myself here. One of his main problems is not including the developer side of the conversation. Despite Thor's absolutely absurd takes on everything from saying league has to go client to client, what have we seen game devs add so far to this conversation? We've seen various game studios come out in support of it. What is he talking about? Is he aware that the entire point of said movement is to get people talking about it and not just shutting it down? The whole aspect of an initiative is to get people signing it because they believe in something, actually taking that forward, and then the lawmakers taking it to the next step. Custard Farms is a video effectively addressing all of these points, and he does. Threatening questions asked, and I absolutely recommend everybody watch it. I will have it linked down below. And again, Thor says, too many problems with the language that's currently written. He just keeps repeating this. Of course, he's not going to propose his own version of this, by the way. He's just going to complain about this, say you need to do this instead, and then run away, not fixing anything in the actual industry. Good job. I actually want to know, what has he done in the games industry other than just like, I understand his learning and getting people making games, but what has he done to actually help consumers in this aspect? Like, I'm not too sure about that part of him. He says, this is my wheelhouse, this is what I do, and this is what always comes up in his videos. I'm a 20-year developer. I've been doing this for so long. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a web developer. I've been doing this for 7 years, commercially, just say. A bit longer when I've been doing it in school and stuff like that. I'm not using that as a serious benchmark, but this is what I want to say. This guy is so much more older than me. I look up to him as a shining example of the kind of person you can be in the game dev space. His career is astounding, and despite this, he uses it as a reference for his nonsense take, where I can refute everything he's said. I can go line by line and go, this isn't right, he hasn't said this right, he doesn't understand this, he doesn't understand that. I can point to this source, that source, and every other source that exists. I can reference his own tweets where he's now backtracking seemingly on his whole asset preservation argument, now distincting them between a community, like social preservation, and an asset preservation. Who's ever said that? The only person that said that is Thor, and he made that up when nobody has talked about that ever. When I've been talking about like game preservation with like colleagues and fellow gamers and stuff like that, we're not sitting there like, God, I really wish I could experience Modern Warfare 2 like 2009. No, I just want the dedicated server so I can host it myself, and I can invite some buddies in, and we can still play the game that we bought. It's nothing to do with, like, yes, I'd love to go back to 2009 when I was a kid in high school and just playing games all day, right? But I don't have a time machine. That's a nonsense argument. You can't use that argument. It's not right. It's effectively like, you can't do anything legislatively because you don't have a time machine, and you can't like snapshot the societal, everyone playing the same game at the one time, like Fortnite. He again just reiterates his entire position is to stop telling people that they're buying a game and just make it to allow the current situation with better language around the buy button. False position on this issue, from what I can gather, is he wants to preserve the licenses, the sort of license method that currently exists in software development and especially in games. He wants to change it so that the language around the buy button is different. So instead of it saying, you're buying a game, you're now effectively buying a license for a game, or you're now effectively renting a game. One of those sort of concepts. I'm not entirely sure. And then He's a 20-year game dev, I think. That's why you should listen to him. Like, that's it, basically, from his videos. The wording has to be more serious, but he then says the only thing he'd probably support is a change in the language for the button. He's fine with the fact that live service games get shut down after 10 years, despite sequels moving players onto the next game so they can shut it down. The initiative is too vague, government might not be fully up to speed on what the real problem is. So that's Thor's position. I'm quite happy saying that's what his position is. And he agrees that, effectively, if you have a single player game and someone adds like a multiplayer live service aspect to it where there's no need for it, that shouldn't probably exist. There should be a way to sort of call out that behaviour from a game studio, whatever that means. So here's a 40-minute video on this, kind of closer to mine actually. He's going up there, and of course I've disliked it because I don't agree with his takes. 68k views, 2k likes. He's not coming out of the woodwork on this strong. And of course the comments here are quite against them to some effect. Well look, the issue with the crew is that the game doesn't need online connectivity to engage with most of the content, yet without servers you can't even play the game. There you go, single player game with live service bolted onto it. Something that Thor should hate, but is now seemingly like, against. I feel that Prime is totally missing the core point that this was made at the beginning, that sellers should not be able to make things that are sold as goods and offered by stop service in them. Yeah. Every healthcare software, we sell both as a license and a subscription, even then, with an extremely favourable EULA that would never be able to get away with what game publishers get away with. The only reason it's allowed in games is because no one dies. Not having an end-of-life plan would bankrupt us if we ever drop support. Game publishers should have the same requirements. This is the most basic kind of consumer protection, when it's already probably illegal to sell these game software license rentals like they're goods, but they get away with it because not enough people want to sue over $50. That's an incredible take. I'm going to like that purely for the vibes. So, again, I've took the liberty of going through this 40-minute video and making points of it. I'm not going to react to it because, again, I don't hate Prime, alright? I'm not trying to throw him under the bus on this one, but sadly he's picked a position and I've got to talk about it. So in the Primeagens video, in general, his main point initially is that software development as a whole is going to be impacted by this legislation, by this initiative. He believes that just because it affects things like video games now, it's not going to knock on effect straight into web development. So you now have to release the code for your service, I guess, I don't even know how that would work. Like, the way I would kind of imagine it is if I make software and I license a theme from someone from Theme Forest, I can't then distribute that. I'm beholden to a license that I would have to not include the theme with my software. The problem is, if I knew that, and that was legislation from the outset, then I would simply just have a theme switcher. These things are easy enough to implement, where you just, I have this on my Vue application because I wanted to test 2 different CSS frameworks. I just wanted to do it with normal CSS to see what the sort of load times were, and then I wanted to bring in Tailwind to see what it was like with that. So I have 2 different methods that I can load there, with multiple different ones I can add any other CSS framework that I want to it. This is possible, but again, people like Prime are going to just go insanely overboard and say that this isn't possible because of certain licenses and certain this and certain that, when, yeah, maybe, but you can just keep them out and still distribute. I don't know why you couldn't. If the crew had 12 million people playing it, would they have killed it off? So this was one of his points, that the game didn't have that many players, so killing it off was kind of fine. My point again on that is that if they had 12 million people playing it, you try to tell me that it wouldn't win, it would have cost them just astronomically more to keep the servers online. He thinks in general that because of this is, and by the way, I'll give him props here because he's actually going through the FAQ, looking at the questions and reading the answers. I don't think he went through all of them. I think he got to the MMORPG one and then stopped or something like that. But I'll give him credit for it. Alright, top marks. He actually read. Look, he's doing research on stream. I refuse to believe Pirate Software did this because Prime's take is way better than Thors's. So he believes that you can't put Pandora back in the box. Other pressures have to give. So what that means effectively is, because this is just the way it is, it's kind of hard to put the cat back in the box effectively, or whatever that saying is. And what I would reference with that, if you can sort of see it up there, is humanity's overcame challenges like asbestos and building materials and CFCs and refrigerator gases. Are you telling me that we can't overcome this? I don't believe it. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. If you say this is different humanity now, I might accept that as a point, but I don't believe that we can handle those catastrophes and we can't handle a game licensing catastrophe. I'm sorry, I don't accept that as an argument. Especially not when I have the historical relevance of humanity coming together and solving problems, and we're meant to be software engineers. We can't solve this problem. Don't give me it. Come on, you guys are older than me, you know more than me, you know this. He's not really a fan of it because EU making laws that would effectively reach into other countries, and I get that. I had to have a bit of an awakening moment with this in regard to the whole Brexit referendum thing, but this is kind of what this is. The EU is fighting consumer laws and forcing it on other countries. And don't get me wrong, companies don't have to do it, but it's most profitable for them to do so. They're probably going to do it that way. I'm happy about it because it's consumer focused, but if it wasn't, yeah, I wouldn't be happy about it, that's for sure. So I actually accept that as a point. I think he's absolutely right there. We can, let's see, the community will do it though, the community won't do it. Yeah, I don't know what he was talking about here about 1009. Someone said, never doubt the ingenuity of the community, and he said the community won't do it. But then he said the community will. I wasn't too sure there. I would like him to clarify that, whether or not he thinks like reverse engineering software has no bearing on all of this. Like it does, I think. The community is pretty excellent. The company is forced to give away open source, give away server code that they're really proud of. I think this point was a little bit iffy. The company being forced to give away like server code that they're really proud of, that they've achieved, when the game's been binned anyway, is I mean, it's a point, but like those engineers that made it could be gone anyway. Like, I don't know who cares anymore. There's some guys that stay around for 20 years, but if the company's forced to open source server code that they're really proud of and they don't want to like give it away because it's like super proprietary and great. Again, I don't think this sort of stuff matters. GTA 5 source code was leaked. Twitch source code was leaked years ago. It's not changed anything. It's not like made YouTube great at streaming or anything like that. It's not a problem in today's day and age. These proprietary secrets are just, even if they did give it away, the worst that would happen is consumers would get a better experience in different games. The actual worst thing that may actually happen is you get exploits and issues around the sort of server code and stuff like that anyway. But I think it's typically best to, and again, sort of developer here, to get people looking at your code and finding problems with it. Exploits and whatever else can be hidden in the wild, and I think just hiding it isn't a solution. Like we've seen with Call of Duty 4 and 5, their dedicated server tools have been out for years, so there's now exploits about remote file execution and stuff like that. If you are running those, you got to keep them patched, and I think even now it tells you to use community versions and stuff like that. But anyway, even forgetting all of that, having them released in some fashion, again, this is end of life plan, but maybe there could be some scenario where the studio is winding down support for the game. They release the server binaries and they give 6 months support to patching those binaries to make sure that they're appropriate for use by the community. And I'm not talking about this from a for-profit company that must absolutely make more money than exists in the world. I'm talking about this from a game development studio that wants to do right by its customers and wants to do right by the gamers that actually play their games. I think most developers want to make sure that the software they're putting out there is good. And if there was going to have to be some open source model or whatever, they would want to make sure that it's not exploitable or going to cause problems with all of them. He says, you think for a second it would be some easy change to make the game single player only. Again, I don't think he's understood the argument. This is the problem like Thor had. He's not understood that the argument is want to try and keep the current game stable and functional, not re-architect the whole game. So I think he's got that point from Thor. Imogen thinks this isn't going to apply to the design phase of software. He's too busy caught up on how this affects current software transitioning to this model. So yeah, so I think I've written this in a way that it's not in the case that he doesn't think this is going to apply to it. He's not thinking in that aspect of this is going to be in 2035 when a new swath of video games being released for PlayStation 7 and it doesn't affect anything in the current generation. We need to get into that mindset and understand that we can absolutely like account for that impact, and he's not really doing that. Everyone just imagine some AAA game, but these laws impact all games. So that was a quote from him, and because of this, he's seemingly unaware that laws can kick in at different revenue levels or metrics. For some reason, these guys understand that licenses can impact you at different company levels, different revenue levels of a company, but somehow government, that doesn't apply to government. You have tax bans. Like, the government could figure this out. Don't worry about it. I just don't think that's an argument. Sorry, again, I think it's just easily refutable. This is already a law where certain laws don't apply if you're not at a certain revenue level. And you would just have that in there. And that's one of the arguments that a company could just create shell companies and just have the revenue capped at a certain point, but I don't think that's just silly. I think that's just silly. One point that I would say is a game which goes into critical success could be impacted by having to deal with a law sooner rather than later. So if I make a game and I've just went, I'm not going to bother with this EU law, wouldn't impact me anyway. If my game blows up like Palworld, I'm now on the hook because I might have to then build in some end-of-life plan for this game when I've got a barrage of revenue and I want to try and build up and scale up servers and do all this and do all that. I can see that being a problem, and I can accept that being a problem. I think that needs to be considered. But you'll notice, ladies and gentlemen, I said that. This wasn't these guys saying that. This is me figuring this out. There's a point that these people aren't bringing up. These might be the top development content creators. What are they doing? Why aren't they bringing that point up? He reiterated that people want a single-player experience. Again, kind of misunderstanding it. Primeagens are aware that industry partners and lobbyists would probably set a time frame. I have timestamps here, so it's 1659. You can actually see in my notes just above my head, like what I'm sort of reading out. So you can go to these timestamps and listen to it for yourself. All videos will be in the description. 1659. Primeagens are aware that industry partners and lobbyists would probably set the time frame. 1750. More laws equals less games being made. Classic. That part where there's more regulation, we can't pump oil. You know, it's the same argument used for every industry. It's not impactful. It's not a big deal. It's just consumer rights. And even then, it's like adding in a server IP line and just making sure that server binaries are in some way can send them out. It used to be this way. We can go back to that stage. We can go back. You got into the weeds a bit on how servers are built. This is kind of where I'm coming at. I had a chat with some guys on Reddit regarding the dedicated servers and like potential problems with them. And I did a lot of research into this as well. So I'm going to pause this for a minute because we're going to have a little talk. This is the dedicated server section. My understanding is that a lot of games have released with dedicated servers, and all those games have license agreements for things like Metal's Audio, for physics like Havoc and X, Y, and Z, that they've licensed parts of their game. GTA, Hypothetical 4, is that peer-to-peer? That may be peer-to-peer. That has audio and stuff like that. I don't know, right? But there's a lot out there that are dedicated server, right? And you can probably go and find a list of them somewhere. Unreal Engine, that has a dedicated server component with it, and you can build and release that and send it up to PlayFab, Azure PlayFab. And that effectively handles all your server infrastructure for you. Now, would you know what other game uses PlayFab? Maybe a hint. Rainbow Six Siege. So they have a dedicated server file component. They upload it to PlayFab, and it handles all of their server and game server infrastructure. Simple as that. I don't know why that couldn't be bundled in some way to then allow it to be shared with other customers and other customers' own PlayFab accounts. It's all just DevOps at the end of the day. It's meant to be easy, is it not? Not easy in terms of understanding, but easy in terms of reproducing and having config files saved and stuff like that. So my understanding around dedicated servers is a little bit, I don't understand why this wouldn't be a problem in terms of like from a licensing perspective, because when I asked for examples, people couldn't give any. They just said this definitely happens, but then didn't list anything. And my rebuttal to that argument is, if a law came in which says games must release their dedicated server files, and the developers of these binaries, these components for dedicated servers, these physics engines, these audio engines, this and this, turned around and said, no, you can't release that with your dedicated server because we don't want you to. How will they have any sales when every game developer has to do it? You know, that effectively means that they're doing themselves out of business. That's just how it works. Like, when it becomes a law, everyone has to abide by it. Apple don't get to release another iPhone, call it an A phone, and put in a lightning connector back into it. Like, these laws affect everybody. The market would have to change to account for it. That's just how it would work. Primeagen can't say this only affects, or this is going to have a knock-on effect across web development, and then not consider the fact that the law would improve all those aspects as well, because all that software that you're probably using would have the same agreements in place to make sure that it can be reproduced and used by the consumer. I think that's a pretty good argument right there. Haven't heard any rebuttal for that. 2146 mentions Black Ops Warzone server being more complex despite Black Ops 3 having dedicated server tools. Maybe he's talking about another Black Ops game, but Black Ops 3 released dedicated server tools. You can run a server yourself and it works fine. Warzone's more complicated, obviously, But the complication is the matchmaking server, not the running of the game. Which, have you ever played Warzone? It lags like crap the first 100 players. They aren't running that on good hardware there either. We might get a better experience if we get it community based. Providing tools for any kind of source results in more cheating. So in my view, web developer hates open source, in my opinion. I think having source be available is a good thing. It means people can build from it and improve on it. I'm not against that. I'm a big proponent of open source software. Where I've been able to, I've always open sourced anything that I've did. If anyone's ever asked for it, a lot of my software's don't know why you would want it, but yeah, not a problem for me. Again, this might be a personal preference, but I think it speaks to the character of someone that they're against source code being released in some aspect like that. I think, especially Thor, who is an offensive security researcher, should understand that providing source allows other people to work on it, find other problems, fix it, and provide pull requests, whatever else. It's just good vibes. Alright guys, we're back. It's a new day. It's a new t-shirt. Don't worry about it. We're going to kick off from where we left off. Or at least try to. So on my notes, where we were was discussing the thought about death threats or something like that. I had to go back and watch my last video and went, oh. So yeah, I think people, while they are correct in some instances to call it out, in some instances I think it draws more attention to it, I think mentioning that you got death threats is just kind of a, well yeah, you're on the internet, part of the argument. I don't think it brings much to the conversation other than trying to give yourself a bit of, victimization, that, oh, this happened to me. So, right, I get that, but people that are calling you stupid, you don't engage with them either. You wouldn't listen to their arguments, so why are you bringing up this? It's a bit, yes, we know, it's not good, but let's keep on the debate here, please. In regards to what the rest of what the Primeagens said, I said here, he's completely off Thor's ass on a genuine 10-second clip, so let's just keep rolling it.
There is, no way. That was, single-handedly the most beautiful take you could have. Good to take down thing, bad with vague language. What?
Good to take down thing, bad with vague language. This is the point that we're going to keep coming back to in all of these sort of content creators. The vague language is part of it. It's an EU initiative. I know I've said this 100 times during the video, but this is somebody that is meant to be an influencer in the space, who's meant to be pretty well educated and is meant to sort of guide you, and in some instances be a voice of reason in this dark space that we call YouTube. That's at least the way I view it. I give these content creators a lot of credit, and Thor relies on this because he always mentions his 20-year career, and I think it's good to do so because that's his credentials. That's where he gets his ability to say what he does. And some people call it arrogance, some people will call it his ego. I think the guy just has a lot of experience in the industry, and as such, he's got a right to kind of say what he wants. But the problem is if he has a right to say what he wants, then people like me are going to criticise him when he doesn't do the research. And that's what Prime's doing here. He's just repeating that Thor had an excellent point, nothing was wrong with it, everything's vague, nobody knows what they're talking about except Thor. And I don't agree with that. Because, in essence, if he did kind of agree with that, he would have came away with the same conclusion, but he goes into protocols and stuff like that, which Thor didn't.
Dude, you're telling me this tepid take, this lukewarm take, is death threat deserving?
It's not death threat deserving, ever. The problem is, Thor didn't just do this. And I don't know if this was at the time when he made the second video, but on his first one, he called Accursed Farms disgusting and pure went into him for no reason. He got really personally attacked for it somehow. And yeah, death threats aren't good. But this isn't all he did. He didn't just say that. He didn't just say, I don't support it because it's too vague. Because then someone could just educate him on how EU initiatives work. But you can't do that because he says he's not going to change his mind. That's the problem.
Dude, come on. That is crazy.
And having these scenarios where you're so far up your boy's arse isn't good. You're meant to be the balance, and having three content creators that just say the same thing is pointless. And again, he doesn't say the same thing because he goes in. Prime's getting a lot less of my criticism here because I think he actually brings up some good points regarding the ability to share protocols, and he actually brings in some decent arguments regarding malicious compliance. Things that Thor didn't do. Like you would expect Thor, with people, someone that's in like the sort of cybersecurity business and someone that's like done all this, to know how people can comply maliciously. But he brings up arguments out of his arse that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
With government entities. It's as written, it is quite dangerous. And I'm not.
All right, hold on. There's another one of these clips. We're getting. Oh my gosh, I am now officially onto Asmongold's side. How? Okay, dude, this is a wild one. To be all the in the full circle, I'm now officially into Asmongold. Here we go.
We also have a values clash. You state repeatedly that a game being permanently disabled.
So this clip here, this is the one that set me against Thor. Was his reaction to this. I thought he was a petulant child, and I'm not trying to do ad hominem on this. The guy literally, in response to this, goes, "You're disgusting because of your argument is that you've called politicians out correctly." But I found from their video, actually, that it was kind of some hypocritical takes that Thor took. He was actually saying that you have to be careful with things like this because the politicians aren't aware of the sort of aren't aware of the industry. They're not aware of the nuance of the industry, especially. And then when Carson Research brought that up, he's disgusting. Like, oh, he doesn't understand the billion-dollar industry that's in these constituencies' backyard. How terrible is he? It's like, well, you just said that.
Well, it's not a problem. It is not. A live service game is meant to end one day. There's nothing wrong with that.
There is something wrong with that, though. There is something wrong with a live service game ending, and I like Prime to push back on that.
This is where we very clearly disagree.
But he's nodding his head. So what I have to do here is take, he agrees with him. So now he's lumped into this whole thing. And I wouldn't like him to be, because on some essences, it sounds like he's just defending a friend, and in other essences, when you go through his points regarding the protocol, and regarding the good points he brings up with malicious compliance, he's not on the same side. Like, when you get into the nuance of Prime's argument, it actually makes a bit of sense. His voice has some credibility here, but I'm 26 minutes into it, and it's not going well so far, unfortunately.
You're actually the most high-profile person I know that is adamantly against what we're doing. Cool.
Why would you say cool to that? I'm reacting again to the video I've already reacted to. I don't get it.
I'd be fine with having a discussion with you on where we could at least clarify things, but your choice. I don't think I want to do that. And the reason why is this. It is because specifically your video that made me not interested in wanting to talk to you. It is specifically this portion of your video, right here, where you discuss reasons why your initiative could pass. And your description of this, I find to be disgusting.
Politicians like easy wins.
Disgusting.
This doesn't require them to do much at all. Politicians
it's such harsh language. It's so charged.
So this isn't
a big
consequence to them or most of their constituencies. EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
So politicians are going to put this forward because it's an easy win, they don't understand the subject matter, and it's a diversion from more serious issues.
We already discussed this, which is, do you really want these people making these laws, especially if they're going to have easy wins, because they're going to go to the most hyperbolic version of it all, right? Because the loudest people on the internet are always the ones that are going to be the most hyperbolic side in which the politicians are going to agree with. Do you want the most hyperbolic people doing that? I don't at all. I want none of it.
I don't have.
Which is a problem, because we're not talking about California law, as Prime eventually quotes at some point in this at 30 minutes or so. We'll get to that. You've got Americans, fucking Americans, talking about the EU legislative process, which has generally been pretty fucking good for consumer rights. They haven't done the research. Oh, they're going to be hyperbolic, they're going to be like the FTC, they're going to be like California. It's like, says who, mate? Who says this? You say this. Like, go and do a video with me where we go 9 hours and we start trudging through EU legislative documents. Let's do that. This React bullshit has to end. It's giving people with far too much credentials the ability to talk about things they don't know about.
Have any respect for that. And I don't have any reason to have a conversation with you because of this.
By the way, this whole, that said, we have a bunch of values clash. You stated repeatedly that a game being permanently disabled is not a problem. For a live service game, I can agree with that. If it is...
Why? Why can you agree with that? What? Just World of Warcraft is a live service game. Are you telling me that if I was there in the trenches of Warlords of Draenor, it was a bad time for World of Warcraft. Shadowlands ain't got shit on what Warlords of Draenor was doing that same raid for, I think it was 2 to 3 years. That was the pinnacle of depression. I think I joined World of Warcraft, like, mainstream, at the sort of tail end of that. Like, not the tail end, like, the last year end of having that raid, and it was an absolute shit show. Like, it was a complete and utter shit show. Are you telling me that if Blizzard had just stopped World of Warcraft then, that you'd be alright with that? Like, oh yeah, all those mounts that you collected, and all those achievements you got, and all that time you spent doing characters and transmogs and mounts, and all that game time you spent money on, and now that there's a store, all those mounts that you bought, and the microtransactions, and the server transfers, and the potentially thousands upon thousands of dollars that you spent on this live service game, it is now gone. And software developers like the Primeagen, like Theo, like Thor, will turn around and say to you, yes, because I want to build you a version 2, and I want to sell you that. I think that's bullshit. I think the consumer, at a certain point in time, when they have invested so much into something that they love and care for, should get that product. Whether or not that business has to provide the server code, or has to provide some fucking protocol that Prime's pulled up out his arse, or some malicious compliance, let them deal with it. Let the EU build a law, because I kind of believe in what they're doing as an organisation, as a political one at that. Let them figure out what they think would work best for these companies, and we'll see how it goes. And you know, if it doesn't work, let's do a second initiative. Let's start somewhere. Let's start doing something. Because at the minute, these guys turning around and going, yeah, we'll just change the button to rent, is about as useful as butter during summer. It is pointless. I absolutely detest keeping the status quo, and that's all that does. It just keeps the status quo.
It is truly a live service game. Like, wow. Again, it'd be great if they gave us a server address and the protocol they use, and then anyone can implement it. That would be like the nicest possible thing they could do, and I think that would probably be a nice little addition, even though it's such a stupid law. But let's just say that they put that as a part.
How was it stupid? Explain to me how it's stupid. Go on, explain. He doesn't.
The law, which they won't. There's no way a politician is going to make a 15-word law. You must provide X and X and X, right? There's just no way that's ever going to happen. But nonetheless, I understand. Live service games do go down.
Oh, again,
right?
sorry, again.
No way. There's no law that you're going to understand. Like, that's the point. There's been WoW server emulators for like 15 years, yes, but that's because WoW is a massive game. You got to remember that a lot of these games don't have the same level of people that are going to be putting in that work, right? So which...
What does that have to do with anything? Do you see how he's floundering a little bit here? Watch his language, right? Someone gives him, right? He says live service games, blah blah blah. Doesn't matter if they go away effectively, right? We will re-listen to that again.
But nonetheless, I understand. Live service games do go down, right? No way. There's no law that you're going to understand. Like, that's the point.
Okay.
There's been WoW server emulators for like 15 years, yes, but that's because WoW is a massive game. You got to remember that a lot of these games don't have the same level of people that are going to be putting in that work, right? So which game went offline? The
What does that have to do with the price of fish? So game companies can't provide end of life for live service games because the community isn't there to do it? Maybe I've misunderstood that by not sitting down and listening for 2 minutes, but the fact that I have a note here at 29:17 say end of Thor's reaction, generally agreeing, doesn't want lawmakers making it up as it might be hyperbolic. Right? So I've got that part there, and then in this part I'm kind of realising, once I've listened to it again, it sounds like he's saying this can't be a thing because there isn't the community to reverse engineer it, so it can't be a law? How? Why? What made you say that? What MMO, live service game, hasn't been reverse engineered in some sense by the community? Battlefield 3 was. It's kind of live service. I'm pretty sure you give them enough time, Helldivers will be reverse engineered in no time. Like, what are we talking about here? Do you see what I mean? Like, give me a source. Don't just say this and then, like, this is a sort of preemption, because I know I'm going to get this comment. no, this drama's 88 days old. Why are you still harping on it? Because somebody has to call this out. You can't have a content creator coming here and being like, World of Warcraft, someone saying World of Warcraft has live service, reverse engineered servers, why can't we just use that logic for other live service games? And you turn around and go, because the community is too small. What? The whole, the whole thing, that hurts the reverse engineering live service community tends to be the legal problems that come out with reverse engineering certain types of games. If there was some kind of EU initiative, legislation, whatever it is, that goes, you know what, let's make that practice legal. Because I'm pretty certain it actually already is. I don't think they can do much about it. But it's scary when you get a cease and desist letter from a company with more lawyers than you probably have people in your city. So, it's quite a fucking scary thing to tell people. Just sort of man up, and just go and fight the man. It's like, yeah, no, I have a family to feed, and I love World of Warcraft, but I'm not going to put my neck on the line just so I can play, patch 1.7, alright? It's not going to happen.
In the sense that it has to be written in very precise terms, precisely going after a very targeted practice. And I think we could all agree on something like, if you have a campaign, if you make a single-player game, you sell it as a single-player game. See, I already can see the problem here. I can actually already...
And this is one of the problems I also want to bring up, right? Is throughout these videos, these guys will say, your solution is bad, it's too vague, it needs to be more specific. Okay? Let's for now agree with that position. They will then sell you the solution. Hey, let's go with this. If it's single player and it's like this, it can be this. But by the way, there's a problem with that. So in fact, nah, my solution doesn't work. Why even say this then? Why even say it? If you don't have a solution, you kind of have to just back the one that's there, or you're kind of just against regulation in its entirety. Unfortunately, if your only thing really is keep the status quo and add a buy button onto it for fucking USDA Organics logo, then you're kind of getting away from it. But Prime does separate himself by the bunch by going forward with the protocol conclusion as per his Twitter post. So, he's doing better than the other guys for sure, but it's not great.
You pass a second video game act that goes into the next one, and it does the next most precise thing, and you slowly grab ground that makes sense. If you make it not precise, people aren't going to do it. 100-word laws don't exist. They should. I think there was a recent push inside Congress, I forgot who did it, that said there could only be laws passed that are up to a certain amount of rules.
I think that's typically said from an anti-regulatory point of view because they don't want regulations in industries. And I don't agree with that stance, personally.
A certain amount of words, which by the way is really, really great, because you do understand what the next level we're going to have is, right? The next level is that the LLMs are going to be, because of Congress and their ability to just only be on the internet and dunk, and that's it. That's now Congress's new full-time job is Twitter. We're now going to have LLMs writing laws, and the laws are going to be just ridiculous, okay?
Again, bringing it into an American context, you can't do this when discussing EU legislation.
Laws must fit in a tweet, and not a tweet longer, a tweet.
So on one hand, he'll say malicious compliance is going to be a way that people get around this, and then on the other hand, he says that it needs to fit in a tweet. The reason why laws are so long is because you have to account for all the things which will be maliciously compliant. It's not enough to just kind of have a law so specific that people then just word it in different ways and the courts can interpret it in a different fashion. I think that's the crazy thing about Thor's take being worried about precedent and then fucking Prime talking about 100-word laws. What a worse way to set precedent than something incredibly vague. He says it's specific, but it wouldn't be. You have to kind of reach out there with quite a wide net and then work your way into something that works for everybody. And that's the whole point of the lobbyist process, to be honest. That's what they're there for.
That was Ben Carson's, that was Ben Carson's one. I love this law, by the way.
So, we've seen this. I don't agree with 100-word laws. Ben Carson's, who's this? Ben Carson. He was in government from 2017 to 2021 under Donald Trump. And I'm not saying that Republicans are all wrong. Sometimes they can have good takes. He is a neurosurgeon after all. He gained fame after being among political conservatives in a speech that perceived critical Barack Obama. Carson announced his campaign in 2016 Republican nomination, formed strong in early polls, and then Trump gave him a seat, basically. So perhaps he's alright, I guess. He did some good stuff. Alright. What's his view on January 6th? That's my only ask. That's all I wonder. Declining polls, withdrawal from the campaign. Tenure. Is he positive for COVID? On November 9th, Carson tested positive for COVID after attending Trump's election night party. He initially treated him with a homeopathic Oleandrex jet on the recommendation of Mike Lindell, the founder of MyPillow. What? Don't think it has any relevance to any of this. 3727. Games can be shut down as long as they tell you. Again, that's a not take I just don't agree with. Hey guys, quick insert from me. When I was editing this footage, as you've noticed, I've been jumping about here and everywhere, different days, etc, etc. Won't bore you with it. I noticed I never had the video footage for Prime discussing California law and salary ranges, which actually is really pivotal to the argument I have kind of against them, because I think he's bringing up the legislation at this point, which is impactful and does help people and is good for consumers, at least better than nothing. So we're going to just fly through it, react to it, and I'll get this in the video.
Problem. That's the major issue for me.
I can give you a perfect example of why this sucks, okay? So I'm going to give you a perfect example. Salary range, Netflix, senior software engineer. I don't know if you know this, but California made a law that you had to advertise the salary range, okay? It's a requirement now for a salary range to be a part of this. Let's see. Okay, so the salary range for this thing is $170,000 to $720,000. This, my friends, is called malicious compliance.
It's also called informing the consumer, something that Prime, Theo, and Thor have advocated for in terms of changing the button from a buy button to a rent button to a buy a license button. This is the window dressing that they wanted. So you're right, it doesn't really solve anything. But personally, I actually like this legislation. It doesn't really have much to do with consumer rights and regarding game preservation. It's got nothing to do with it whatsoever, actually. The good thing about this legislation is that beforehand you would have a job here in data science and engineering, senior engineer role, and you'd be wondering to yourself, how much is this going to pay? Because when I'm going in for salary negotiations and I earn $90,000 and I want $120,000, it turns out Netflix advertised the range of this role for $170,000. So you could be missing out on 50, 60k. Now, to experienced developers like Prime, that he's going to know what the salary ranges are going to be. He'll have contacts in the industry that will be able to tell him any sort of range he needs. He might even have access to better analytics for things like Glassdoor. He might have better methods of pulling that data out. But for normal people like me, who just kind of want to know what it is that we're getting ourselves involved into, know what it is that these roles offer, I was reading an article actually on the BBC where it said that, you know, this has impacted a few people when it comes to their job hunting decisions. They'll go on, and you can Google this, they'll go on and see these ranges and they think it informs them to make a better decision. And honestly, that's good enough for me. I think it's doing its job then. May not help everybody. I'm not saying it would. Perhaps it could be better. Perhaps you can make the range more narrow. But I'm saying it's a pretty decent starting point for something that we can definitely improve on. And the main point I want to drill home is, you cannot use an example of American law, especially state law, which can wield massively, as a comparison to the organisation of the EU. You really can't do it. It's not a one-to-one sort of, you know, like, yeah, Netflix might act out in accordance with EU legislation. They'll get fined to fuck if they do so, like every single other company has done. America doesn't seem to care. That's your problem. Over in the EU, kind of do things differently, kind of hold companies accountable. And for him to raise this point, so kind of misinformed, like he's not bothered ever looking into EU law. I wouldn't expect him to, I mean, why would you when you're reacting to a fucking video about EU legislation and the EU initiative process? How dare I expect you to know what it is that you might be getting yourself into in terms of compliance from private organisations in regards to like how the EU conducts itself? I know that's a crazy ask these days, but it harps on my point that people need to start going away and researching rather than just blind reacting to stuff.
Okay, are they doing what they said? Yes, they did. Does this actually do anything? No, it doesn't. This is why
Says who?
not all laws are great, and we shouldn't have people that don't understand laws making laws. But here we are. There was one recently on Netflix that was literally $90,000 to $1 million. It's just like, gee, I wonder what I'm going to get paid. There's only a $900,000 difference between the two. Make malicious compliance illegal? How?
I don't know what that has to do with anything. Honestly. Somebody outside. No, honestly, I actually don't have any idea what any of that has to do with absolutely anything. Like, okay, Netflix provided a salary range. They were required by law to provide a salary range that way people knew what the job might pay. The fact is, you now know what the minimum pay is going to be. That's a good thing. The fact that he doesn't think that's a good thing shows probably his privilege. Just kind of accusing there. Might be, I don't know.
How would you, oh my gosh, how would you make, you can't comply with the law as written. You have to do it better than we write it, minimally.
Yeah, and on this, you have organisations that if they're not happy with how you're following the letter of the law, and this might have changed in America under the recent rollbacks in regards to that Chevron decision, which again, American problems, but EU organisations will have bodies and groups and whatever else and agencies that will go after companies it thinks, I think it's just actually the courts that kind of goes after them, that they think aren't complying in the sort of best faith, you know, like with the sort of best wishes, they handle these things quite well, I feel like. It's, you always see online where it's like the EU launches some legal bid against Google or Apple or whatever else. You don't see anybody complaining about it. I wonder why. But it's weird that the FTC does that against Microsoft and you do have people complaining. It's interesting. Different dynamics in population, I guess.
I mean, so just remember this, okay? This is why I'm fully on Thor's team, that it, in the sense that it has to be written in very precise terms.
In 100 words.
Precisely going after a very targeted practice. And I think we can...
Which is fucking game licenses or some shit. Or has to be on a box or whatever.
We can all agree on something like, if you have a campaign, if you make a single-player game, you sell it as a single-player game. See, I already can see the problem here. I can actually already see all the...
Yeah, and we've kind of seen that, but
I would laws. Is anybody aware of anything that's inside there? Can anybody tell me laws? Is anybody aware? Could read, right? Like, what was it? Obamacare was 80,000 pages of laws. Is anybody aware?
Obamacare was 80,000 pages of laws. Huh. What I have for you here is the Affordable Care Act of 2017. Commonly known as Obamacare, or Trump Care, or Obamacare Light, I think they call it now these days. It's a conservative movement done by the Heritage Foundation, the same people that advised on Project 2025, funnily enough. And it is about 132 pages, is it? Let's see this one. Is this the right one? HR 1628, American Healthcare Act of 2017. So he says there's 80,000 pages in this. There's not. You have to remember the legislation is written in such a way that the text gets really squished, so you can't really see all of it on kind of like one page. Oh, my health all that just went off there. Whereas if here's a UK government bill, it's a draft investigatory powers bill. It's 300 pages long. 300. If we keep scrolling, well, this says 61, but it's actually a lot longer than that because it's broken up into different sections. So if we go back up, you can see there, page 228, 229, tailored contents into this, that, and whatever else, and certain laws that it sort of impacts, and blah 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 blah. I don't know if you can see page numbers, but you can just Google it. Draft Investigatory Powers Bill. This is the Snoopers chart on the UK. This is 300 pages. So I don't know where Primeagens is getting 80,000 pages from. He can read 152 pages in his sleep. The dude's a developer. He's read books. I don't know why he's promoting misinformation. Unless I don't know what Obamacare is. And by the way, I googled it. This was the only PDF that I could find that's from Congress. Congress.gov. So either he is horribly misinformed, in which case he, as a professional and a leading figure in a space, should not be promoting misinformation. Like, come on. Let's do better here. Let's just do better.
Of anything that's inside there? Can anybody tell me what's inside America's Health Act? No, I don't think there's like probably 4 people on Earth that actually even know what's happening. You know what I mean? Like, it's just ridiculous scrum lawmaking. Let's go. No, not even Congress. Not even Congress. I've read 80 pages and gave up. Yeah, and you.
Why are we trusting what Twitch chat says? Like, I read 80 pages and gave up. The dude was pretty close to finishing it. He only had another, like 60 odd pages to go. So that's like quite reasonable.
Already are in the top 1% of readers, and you're probably not even a lawyer. Reasonable breasts. Do you think I'm going to get death threats for this? I hate.
No, don't give death threats to Prime. Jesus Christ, don't give death threats to anybody. Yeah, so just to kind of summarise this one up and to kind of bring this one back, what do we have in terms of Prime? He's misinformation, misquoting stuff, not really knowing what he's talking about. Kind of the same as Thor, really. And there was only one other thing I wanted to bring up, and that was this last quote at 39:42, where he says, "Just vote with your wallet."
And lastly, vote with your wallets. Absolutely, vote with your wallet. Don't buy things if you don't want more of it, okay? If you want more of it, buy more Fortnite skins. Buy more, many more, because then you can get more of it. You can get all of it you've ever wanted.
And this is just the problem with people that don't really believe in regulations at the end of the day. They believe voting with your wallet, the market will correct itself, despite the fact that our current market has given us the current game development industry and everything that people don't want, including game developers. I'm sorry to say, I don't agree with Prime on much of anything. I think his protocol take is probably the more nuanced, reasonable thing he has. I think some of his tweets following up this is probably a bit more reasonable in regards to what he would like do in regards to like stamp laws and stuff like that. But other than that, that's pretty much it for Prime. Sad to say, he's not the worst of all developers in this, but he's certainly up there in terms of not researching things. He really should be. Would you believe me if I told you that I literally just done probably an hour's rant into this video and it got 2 minutes in and I genuinely didn't record it? I have now reacted to this video 3 times and each time I get more angrier. So here's the 4th, alright? Everyone fucking strap in because I'm not playing around anymore. What we're going to do here is react to Theo's video. I'm going to set it out what's happened just now. So we're going to react to this video. I already did one on this, but I wasn't really happy with the energy that I brought to it. It was quite low, quite mundane. I clipped up some bits of it that I thought were quite good, but we're going to do a fresh one just for the sake of this video, because it is important. It's part of the story, it's part of the narrative, it's part of developers not doing proper research, which I think is important.
I have a lot of thoughts. For those who don't already know me, I'm Theo. I'm a software developer, content creator, CEO, business owner, a lifelong gamer. See me wearing the Outer Wilds shirt.
How old is Theo? Theo Brown, Ping Labs. He has a LinkedIn. Have any age here. He done an internship for Amazon in 2015. And then he was a mentor. Wait, what? He did an internship for 4 months and then became a mentor in Wait, he was a mentor before? He did a software engineering internship. And then was a software engineer full-time for Twitch in 2017 after he did a mentor. As a software development engineer, I've grown from an individual contributor on small systems to a technical lead on large projects. My work has been critical in Twitch has moved from Ember to React, Ember and Rails to React, TypeScript and GraphQL. My experience in web technologies extend. Oh, great! So you fucking moved them to React. Jeez, oh. My expertise in web tech is to send to Twitch's desktop applications using Electron. Yeah, those apps got killed off, didn't they? The developer found a member. This is interesting. Whenever people say they're CEO, it's always they're a business owner. It's always because they made their own business or something like that. I've started a company focused on building better tools for content creators and developers. It was very interesting. I did the same deal. What's very hard is people don't want to pay for it. Right, anyway, let's go. You're 28 years old today. Alright, so is he 28? This was last year. I'm roughly the same age as JavaScript. Okay, so he's about 28. He might be 27. He might be the same age as me. It's very interesting if I come up with someone with probably the same experience in the sort of industry that I have. So he did his big stint at Twitch for 4 years. I did a similar thing. You can go find it if you want to, for a financial company for 4.5 years as well. So we're quite... We dipped our toe into the commercial market and then went away to do our own thing. It's kind of interesting how that worked out, actually. Probably, I bet we have a lot in common, because I've already watched this video. Alright, I'll tell you that. I've already watched this video, and we're both quite heated. So.
Fun fact about that, I was the first person to ever beat the Outer Wild DLC and meet the... I also need to disclose a bias. I am friends with Thor, so you need to know that going in. But that doesn't mean I'm not genuinely kind of pissed right now, because I am.
It can be. I think if you have a friend on the topic, you're going to defend your friend. It's not always going to be one-to-one. And when it comes to developers, there's nothing developers love more than arguing and debating about certain topics. And I kind of think when you have a friend on it, you're not really going to pull them up on it, are you? Maybe that's just me.
Because Thor is entirely correct.
Right.
Every word of what he said is almost like surreal in how correct it is. And the fact that people are still trying to poke holes in it, it deeply irks me. I'm genuinely pissed at the level of entitlement that I'm seeing from gamers. The big difference between
the entitlement from gamers angle is one that's kind of hard to sort of track down. As we're talking about consumer rights here. This is like saying drivers that wanted seatbelts were just entitled and wanted free stuff. And it's the same argument that kind of comes up whenever BMW released a subscription service for their heating their heated seats, and people were like, why should you get it for free? They're offering you a service. Like, same with Tesla, when they were selling cars and they offered you a lower price on it with the assumption that you would then upgrade and pay them more money to get features that were already in the car, but they were software locked. They can sell, like, how is it entitled to want what you're fucking paying for?
how Thor feels and how I feel is that I'm not scared to blast y'all. I am not scared to say the truth.
And this is the problem with somebody who can be quite as heated as me but doesn't do the research or any of the analytics into anything that's going on. You'll notice, like, even Prime, when we reacted to his video, he had up the EU legislation. He was at least going through bits of it. Alright, he was at least going through the FAQ. But with Theo, it feels like this is the attack dog coming out and just burning bridges and setting fire to everything. There's not going to be any rationale sort of arguments here. There's not going to be any... It's going to be ad hominem attacks and calling people idiots. Foreshadowing, by the way.
Reality that the average gamer, not the average person who plays games, but the average person who sees gaming as a huge part of their identity, that person is an entitled asshole.
I don't know what to make of this, because in my estimations it sounds like he's saying, here's a bunch of gamers who want a certain thing, here's a bunch of gamers that don't. And I like these guys because they don't say anything. They just sit there and play games all day and they don't have anything on their minds, really. They just sit there, right? And here's guys that want regulation, games to be improved, whatever else, blah 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 blah. It breaks my brain that Thor isn't on this side of gamers that want improved regulations around games. And I get that partially as being an American and not being a fan of American government and law and stuff like that you might not be too aware of the EU. But then it creates a problem when you have impressionable people like Theo, who, if I was his age, and I do, I look up to people like Thor as being industry giants and people that know what they're talking about. When Thor is so wrong and refuses to budge on the topic, and then we look through his tweets and there he is budging about asset preservation, people like Theo come on and make a fool of themselves. Because they're sitting here defending someone that is wrong at the end of the day. Like, you can water down some of his arguments into being personal opinion, but unfortunately most of them he's just wrong. Like, and Accustomed Farms did an FAQ on a lot of his points that you can go and see.
Straight up. And it sucks. It genuinely sucks. Because game devs are pouring their lives into creative works that are life-changing. I can't...
We need to start rationalising the fact that game devs can just be normal people. Most of them are just people doing a 9 to 5, they're programming, doing a C++ every day. There's no Rust involved, unfortunately, for the Prime, you know. But most of them are there doing a 9 to 5, they're just doing the thing, they're just doing the business. If Prime wasn't doing his Twitch TV stuff, you would have no idea that he was a senior software engineer at Netflix doing the stuff that he does. A lot of the things these people are doing, we never ever hear from. Unless they're on Glassdoor talking about how shit the company is. Look at Rockstars if you want to see some really funny ones that people complaining that they aren't doing anything else other than GTA 5 store items. Those are the normal people. They're the people going in day to day, slaving over, and doing a job. They're not there pouring their heart and soul into games that they necessarily want to do. If you look at the Glasgow development market when it comes to gaming, I think around 60% of it is mobile games, shilling some NFT thing with, and I'm probably burning bridges here with future employers, but it is. It's mobile games that are shit, and they're just doing microtransactions, and they're just doing nonsense. Who's pouring their life and soul into that? It's all just gotcha bullshit to make people spend money. It's games have become an investment vehicle for VC to pour money into, to make it look very pretty, like the way gambling is these days, where you just put money into it and it is a vehicle for extracting wealth from consumers back to VCs. That's all it is. That's what it's became. Back in the day, didn't used to be like that. You had really passionate people making things like the original Xbox. You had really passionate people making things like the Halo games. You had really passionate people making things like Gears of War. All those people are now gone. All of them, pretty much. A lot of the executives and people that made things like Battlefield left that company. They made their own company. They're now doing games that once they wouldn't have ever have created before. They're changed people, which is how it is. Industries change, people change. That's just how it is. It is not this. There might be a couple of developers out there, maybe a couple of studios out there that are really like all those sort of like casual games, whatever else, Outer Wilds. They are. Some of those still exist, but they're not the majority anymore. I personally don't think so. And that's not me rubbishing game devs. I just think when I look at the market, people aren't building the things that they want to. I'm on their side. I want them to build things that they want to. I don't want them stuck building microtransactions into a stupid Battlefield game. I think people joined EA, wanted to make a really good Battlefield game, and were stuck building shit. They were stuck. They just had to, because they have to put food on the table. And it's a privileged point, I think, from these guys to say anything else, honestly, personally.
Fathom where I would be today if it wasn't for Outer Wilds. This game didn't just change my life, it might have fucking saved it. And the fact that developers of games like that, of things that are literally changing lives, are getting more roadblocks thrown at them because of the entitlement of gamers is just, it's genuinely hard to fathom.
So we're going to bring Theo up on his first fucking red flag, alright? We're swearing because we're annoyed. The Outer Wilds is a game that probably would not be impacted by this, any of this. If you look at Steam, it is a single player game, and that's it. It's a single player game, it's a rated a 7, there's no external DRM that I can see. Why would this be impacted by the initiative? It wouldn't be. The initiative is for effectively like live service games, effectively, and games that are single player but then have a multiplayer component which make them liable to be shut down. Like The Crew. Outer Wilds is not like The Crew. We have to do better. We can't let people get away with repeating nonsense like this.
And I had to take some time to talk about it. Normally what I talk about is code stuff on my main channel. This channel is more general appeal stuff, from Apple drama to shitting on Adobe to covering Pal World. I genuinely like talking about these things and don't get the opportunity too much. So I'm thankful to Thor for giving me this opportunity, but also need to be very clear. I'm not making this because I just want to talk about gaming or because I want to get a free video. I'm talking about this. Hell, I'm interrupting my dinner for this because watching Thor's video and seeing the comments made me feel genuinely kind of sick.
Sick? Like, him calling it sick, for saying the Cursed Farms is disgusting, like, we don't need this rhetoric in the space, we really don't.
It's horrifying. So I'm going to do what he didn't do, and I'm going to read through some of these stupid comments and explain in detail.
Stupid comments. I think that's ad hominem, right? I mean, he's just setting us up, really, just like, if I have at any point said any of these guys are stupid, this, that, or whatever, or used the language that Theo does in this video, I apologise. I take it back, okay? Because I don't want to be someone like Theo who uses this type of language and this type of rhetoric and this type of attack. I will, if you're like eventually just being a brick wall and just not letting me talk to you. A bit like how Flaw did at the end of his videos, where he's like, I'm not going to change my mind, bye bye. So, alright then, well, you're going to get attacked then for that. Don't give them death threats, just saying.
Why they are as dumb as they are. If you haven't already watched Stop Killing Games and Stop Killing Games 2 from Pirate's channel, Go do that. I don't know why you're here if you haven't
Watch
already
my
watched
reaction
those.
videos, I bet.
Watch those, come back, and then watch as I make fun of these comments because this is going to be good. Single player games
What
that
is
are
our
online.
count? This could be good. I want to count how many comments he reacts to. So let's go down. So count on comments, Theo. So I'm convinced it isn't that many because I don't think I could find that many that you could really pick apart.
Only are, and then watch as I make fun of these comments because this is going to be good. Single player games that are online only are rare. Not so rare anymore. Not at all. Yeah, they are. They're absolutely rare.
Single player games that are online only are rare. They can be if you include things like DRM and all that sort of stuff. You need third party services to activate them. If you don't have those, you can't play them anymore.
They're incredibly rare. You know what? Let's search top 10 single player games 2024. Let's see
Okay.
how many of these are in any way a live service. Here Mario, Thousand Year Door. Nope.
Yeah, my first in your door. So that's a console game. It comes in a game cartridge. Yeah, I don't think that would require. I don't know how the Switch works in terms of how it activates its games and stuff like that, but I presume it's like every other console where you just put the game in and it works fine. So yeah, probably right there.
Elden Ring, kind of, but it works fine offline.
Again, probably only if you activate it. Let's look up Elden Ring. Elden Ring, does it have any sort of third-party DRMs? 1912, that's how old we are today. Third-party EULA. It might not. It might not, so that's perfectly fine. It's got online PvP, online co-op. Yeah, so if he says it works fine offline, I'll just agree with that, to be honest.
Hades, absolutely not.
I'll agree with
Cyberpunk
that.
2077 works totally fine offline. I know
That's a GOG game, he's correct there.
that for a fact. I played on an airplane once. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
This whole I played it on an airplane once is not an argument for this. You have to consider the activation cycles of games. This is why he's misunderstanding this. And perhaps this hasn't been sort of outlined very well in SKG, and perhaps I'm misinterpreting it. But in my view, if you have a single player game like GTA 5, and it requires you to log into Rockstar, the Rockstar Social Club, look at what happened to GTA 4. You can't play that anymore because Games for Windows Live went away. It had to do patches and X-Live lists and take out this and take out that. Like, it has to be left in a functional state. That doesn't happen if you have a DRM provider that goes down. He's not reading the initiative.
Birth, totally fine offline.
Final Fantasy, was that Final Fantasy 7?
Offline. I know that for a fact. I played on an airplane once.
Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth is on PS5. Again, I don't know how that works with PS5.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, totally fine offline. Baldur's Gate 3, entirely fine offline. I don't
I think that's GOG.
know why this is number 7 out of the 12. Tears of the Kingdom, totally fine.
You'll notice all the games he's bringing up, for the most part, are all console games. Of course, they're all fine offline. But if you buy them in an online store, and then that store goes down, you lose access to your games. So, what's his argument for that?
Marvel Spider-Man 2, totally fine. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. I will admit, I don't know shit about this game, but
Do the research! Why are you bringing it up? He has googled Spotlight searched one article, and he's now repeating off his fucking neurons. It takes nothing. He could stop the video right now, go away, research, do what I've done. Look how long my video is. I'm going through bit after bit after bit, so you guys can see everything, clear as day, as to why this isn't an argument.
the
That's
little
it.
I do know about the Like a Dragon series would make me very surprised if this was an online game.
Prepare to be surprised. It's a Denuvo game, so you need to activate it through Denuvo. So it's not an offline game.
Red Dead Redemption 2 works fine offline.
But it doesn't load. You need Rockstar to activate it.
Alan Wake 2 absolutely works fine offline.
Alan Wake 2. Alright. Alan Wake 2. How do you play Alan Wake? Oh god. Alan Wake 2 isn't on Steam. It's not on Steam. Alan Wake 2. How the fuck do you play Alan Wake 2? Not on PC. Did it have their own launcher by now? Platform. Oh, it's on Epic. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, right, I'll go here and see. Well, you need the Epic game launcher to activate it then. And that's the same with Steam. Don't get me wrong, I'm not defending Steam here. I'm very much against all of this. I give GOG a pass because they just give you the game. Yeah, I have no idea about Epic or what it requires. It's got cloud save, so I presume you'll probably require offline maybe offline will work. I have no idea. So no, I don't know.
And God of War works fine offline. So where are these
They're all
games?
console
Why
games
is
that
this a
he's
top
referenced.
comment? Why is this the most upvoted comment on the video? It's just wrong. It's just a lie. But gamers are so excited about this narrative. They're just so excited to shit on game devs. And that's the theme.
How? Are they not upvoting it because it might be right because you haven't done any research into it? You're just spouting off nonsense? How is his only response to this? Here's an upvoted comment by 10,000 people. They're wrong, I'm right. How can you be so far up your own arrogant ass to not see that they might have a point? And this is not me saying that upvoted comments are the be all and end all of truth. We've seen what happened for the Boston Bomber on Reddit. What I'm saying is, your first protocol and response should not be, gamers are entitled, they're all wrong, I'm the one that's right. Like, no. Step back, be a professional.
That's what we're going to be pushing throughout most of this, is all of it is gamers looking down on the devs that make the things they love.
What part of that was looking down on the devs? It was about single player games being online only. What is any of that but
I've
the
never
game
seen
dev?
any field that is quite this extreme with that. Like, I come from music, and there's almost an obsession with musicians in the music world. Like, the people who like a song, they don't just like the song, they get obsessed with the artist. They go to their shows, they support them, they hype them up, they defend them, they talk as much positivity as they can about the artists they love. Same thing happens in film and television.
I don't know how we can say this knowing that stan culture exists and the badness that can come along with that and how toxic it can be. I don't know how we can say this with the artists that attract crowds of just massive amounts of haters. Did they forget that Justin Bieber at one point launched and everyone ridiculed this 13-year-old, including myself? I was the same age back then, and it was like a horrible atmosphere for that guy. I feel so bad for him. Such a good guy as well. Like, I feel so bad for him.
Same thing happens with YouTubers. Same thing happens
In movies and that as well, like, no, it doesn't. It
with
truly doesn't.
every field but gaming, where the average thing
not.
someone says about even a YouTuber is leaning positive. But the
The average thing people say, like, what about Johnny Depp and about that girl that he was going out with, I forget her name. Asmongold's had it burned into me. But even like creators like that, Asmongold on YouTube and film creators and whatever, that these guys, like, they're not really that revealed. I think most people, if a celebrity ever gets themselves in politics, you can assure yourself they'll have a death threat within about 5 minutes.
The average thing a gamer says about a game dev is either mean or wrong or both.
I think you can tell he doesn't know what he's talking about here. They can either be mean or wrong. In fact, they could probably be both. It's like, I don't think you're prepared for this, honestly. The average thing a game dev says, the average thing a person says to a game dev is either mean or wrong, as opposed to people absolutely shitting on Gal Gadot every film that she creates.
Very commonly both. Let's dig into some more of these. Isn't
Of course, that doesn't happen according to him.
the idea to get the companies to give the players tools to run their own servers when the company wants to kill those servers? This one sounds noble, and I'll give some credit to this commenter for at least trying, but this is...
Oh, how gracious. How fucking gracious.
No, that is not that simple. I could speak a lot on this as a software developer. Building
Do it.
your binaries in a way that you can just hand them out is not a thing that you can just do. It's not like a switch that they're not turning on or a thing that they are too rude to do. It's a lot of work to build your stuff in a way that it's
A lot of work to build yourself in a way. I disagree. Games have done it before.
self-hostable. For one of the tools that I built, Upload Thing, we've actually been working on this, on making a self-hostable version. We're like 3 months in, and we're still working on it.
That is a massive you problem. I've looked into Upload Thing. It is not that complex. If he wants to invite me to a one-on-one call and we can go over what the hell it is that he's doing, that takes 3 months to get us. And as far as I can tell, I think it can be downloaded and can be sort of self-hosted and stuff like that. Anyway. In fact, no, it can't be, can it? Because it's a service that you log into. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Maybe it's in regards to like the license or the bill or whatever else. No, I've looked into it. I completely disagree. I think turning any service into something that can be self-hosted in about 3 months is probably about right. And I'm going to eat my words there because there's probably things that couldn't be. That, I don't know, game servers and whatever else, but we're not asking for 3 months to do that. It should be done at the start of the project. So, no.
It is hard. Like,
and he's talking about making it self-hostable in a project that previously wasn't. So a lot of things have to change in the code for it to do that. Like
really hard to do. On top of that, Thor proposed a pretty rough theoretical in his part 2 video. Imagine a malicious actor that wants to charge a bunch of money for the servers to a game they didn't make.
He's trying to Kool-Aid well through and through.
Look at something like Team Fortress 2, for example.
Right, he's repeating Thor's nonsense article. Completely nonsense article that was used in the wrong context and is completely mischaracterizing the DS situation. That was an attack on official Valve community servers, and the only way people could play the game was if they had private servers to go and run it on. Which means, like, by the end of it, like, all your players are still playing the game and aren't, like, going to somewhere else or furious or refunding your game or anything like that. They're still able to play. Like, his concept doesn't make any sense in the world of reality.
The game's free to play, which would mean it would be relatively cheap to spam traffic to the existing product.
Isn't it unreasonable to ask this of free-to-play games? While free-to-play games are free for users to try, they are supported by microtransactions which customers spend money on. When a publisher ends free-to-play game without providing recourse to the player, they're effectively robbing those that bought features of the game. Hence, it should be accountable to make the game playable in some fashion once support ends. Our proposed regulations would have no impact on non-commercial games that are 100% free. I agree with that. In fact, you're right, actually.
Look at something like Team Fortress 2, for example. The game's free to play, which would mean it would be relatively cheap to spam traffic to the existing product. If I really wanted to cost Valve a bunch of money, it wouldn't be too hard to spin up a bot farm just playing Counter-Strike Go or Team Fortress 2 and spamming their servers with an unbelievable amount of traffic. Thankfully, Valve...
I would ask him to go and do this to show us how easy it is. You would have to have an automated bot that would register Steam accounts and in some essences launch the game, enter the match, and weren't kicked out straight away by some sort of VAC detection. Like, you would have to have some sort of proxy set up that would go off and join different VPNs and whatever else, make sure that your traffic isn't all coming from one provider or one location or one this or one that to trip up their systems. Like, I think he's just talking. Like, I think it's a bit harder than what he's making it out to be.
Valve makes enough money to survive this because they take 30% off of every other game dev's income, which is absurd.
It's not necessarily true for most publishers, though. I think they can rearrange the deals. I think they can work out 15% deals.
But that aside, God, if you guys get me started on Epic right now, this will not be a pretty comment section. Not that it will be anyways. Gamers are very entitled. Actually, you know what? Fun challenge for you. Scroll down and see how far you have to scroll before you see a gamer shitting themselves, saying something incredibly stupid. You only have to scroll.
What is... Wait, he just calls people stupid. If I scroll down right now, the top comment is Theo, fun enough. I've had a surprise number of game dev featured privately. So these are my comments, they always appear first because I did them. The top one is A55. What do you mean that people don't care when they pay for Netflix and remove content? That's exactly what a lot of people have been complaining about. So Theo has shit on himself in not having the correct argument to go along with this. The fact that other industries use licenses to create a shitty service and destroy consumer protections doesn't mean that games should just do the same. The difference is that when Netflix removes a movie or show, it's very easy to just pirate it. If Bungie closes their Destiny servers, players are screwed. The first comment I get is a BAMF. That's what I get. Someone that knows what they're talking about. And we haven't even got to that point in Theo's argument I'm going to fucking rinse him for.
Scroll right below the description where there's a highly upvoted comment of somebody saying that I'm an asshole. Guaranteed.
Doesn't even happen.
The problem is that Valve makes a lot of money, so they don't have to worry about that so much. But if you're an indie dev that decided to provide your game for free,
don't think it'll work.
You might just get destroyed by this bad actor. And now if you're legally enforced to release the server code once you're done, that bad actor can take that server code and go host your game for money, even though you didn't charge. It would actually be possible as a result of this legislation for somebody to maliciously destroy an independent developer's work, steal their work, and then sell it when the original dev wasn't doing that.
Theo thinks when this legislation comes to pass, people are going to be DDoSing AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, knocking the world's internet offline so they can get some guy's game who has 4 buyers on for free, for the server code for free. What ludicrous nonsense. This wouldn't ever happen. I cannot debate with people that are debating in bad faith for futuristic scenarios that is just completely made up. You wouldn't even get this in a dream.
Any legislation that makes that possible isn't just bad, it's disastrous for gaming the art
Do you believe this? I often ask myself, surely they don't actually believe this.
form. And I cannot believe people are unironically backing it because they hate Ubisoft so much.
What about
You know what I hate more
Ubisoft?
than Ubisoft? Ubisoft's games. Don't fucking buy them. They're bad.
Oh, look at that. That whole argument of just pay with your wallet. Fair enough, how that isn't working, as it feel.
Let's go back to these comments.
I like the Assassin's Creed games. I think they're very good. I think they're, for what they are, in terms of like giving you some kind of historical relevance to certain time periods and letting you go through those worlds and have a pretty fun time and level up your character and do this and do that. I love them. I think they're great games. I didn't like Ragnarok, but that's an aside.
Because it only gets worse from here. The idea that people won't host game servers if they aren't allowed to monetize them is extremely silly. There are decades
We're on comment number 2 now. I think we're on comment number 2. 3?
of old games, all of which are still playable and active thanks to fans hosting their own servers. The official matchmaking servers for Counter-Strike Global Offensive
So notice that there. The idea that people won't host their own game servers if they're not allowed to monetize them is silly. There are decades of old games, all of which are still playable and active thanks to fans hosting their servers. Will he address that point?
shut down recently after Counter-Strike 2 came out, but the game isn't rendered unplayable. You can still go and play on community servers. This used to be the norm. I love they called the Counter-Strike example out because CS2 is a free upgrade to Counter-Strike Go. So no, it's not like the thing you purchased disappeared.
It is! My Overwatch doesn't exist anymore because of my free fucking upgrade to Overwatch 2.
It got upgraded, and you're insisting on playing the old version. Stupid.
How do you see what he said there? The arrogance. It's stupid. I wouldn't want to do that. Why should anyone be protected? I hate this. I hate this with a capital H. And you'll notice he never addressed the first point. He just harped on that absolute nonsense. I know all I've said to most of these like takes is they're just nonsense. But how can you take it any other way? These dudes are saying, if I come to you and give you a shovel and upgrade it to a fork and take the shovel away, you've still got the shovel. What? It's over there. I've been given a fork. It doesn't even do the same thing. I could use a numerous amounts of examples for this. It's just, and the fact that he doesn't have a rebuttal, the fact that he doesn't have facts to go back on and go, in fact, no, I don't think it actually means that because of this, and this, and you can still play the original game using this method. He just says it's stupid because he doesn't have a fucking bone in his body to actually come forward with actual reasonable points. He doesn't have anything. He's got nothing. He's just calling people stupid. It's just ad hominem attacks.
Let's see if there's any other big ones in here. The Valve dick riding is unreal. Like, Valve is fine. They've had really important innovations. I love my Steam Deck. I love my Valve Index. Half-Life Alyx is one of the best experiences I've ever had in a video game. But to pretend Valve is this like great holier than thou image that we can just trust to make everything right, and if we all were more like Valve, it would be good. It's just fucking delusion. That's all it is. God, this one's insane. If this
I don't really have anything to say about that. Valve were the ones that started loot boxes and all that kind of stuff. Like, they have done some good things, they have done some bad things. They're a private company, they're going to win on some things and lose on others. Calling it delusional, I think it's a bit far.
kills live service games, they shouldn't exist. It is the smallest move forward towards consumer protection. Just the amount of entitlement in this comment is
Remember, Theo just told you that buying the Assassin's Creed games was stupid and you shouldn't buy them. And now he's going to tell you that, you know, because he likes something, you should go out and buy it and it should exist. Like, you know, you can't really have both sides of the arguments there, mate.
is actually surreal. It's hard for me to comprehend. Gotta say,
All of this has been hard for you to comprehend. You've not comprehended any of it. You've not understood anything. Why did you even make this video? You don't understand it.
This is my first time hearing you have a seriously uninformed and myopic take. It's one thing to make an offhand comment about it on stream because you hadn't researched it yet. But this video
Yes.
is just completely misunderstanding both the
Hadn't researched it yet. This commenter, Merif13, on point. They haven't researched it yet. They could go away, look up the legislation, and come back with an informed opinion, and they could go away and find a games list that doesn't have games that are locked in with DRM and are console games that will go away the minute the store turns off. Like, they could do that. All the Wii U and Wii games are gone when the stores went down. Like, that is a thing that actually happened.
consumer perspective and expectations, and lacking in all the historical references that explain why those expectations not only exist, but are in the majority of cases very reasonable.
I will give you a hint as to what Theo's answer is going to be, and it'll be something like, "No, I'm right, you're dumb," which is a great response if you're 13.
No, that is not true. It
Hey.
seems like people just have a fundamental misunderstanding of what a license is and how it works.
Oh,
which is
no,
really
license.
funny when you consider the fact that people watch most of their movies and TV on Netflix and listen
The license, yes. The whole practice around licenses is one that's been done through consumers voting with their wallet and has not been just forced upon everyone through all aspects of software by people like Theo, who are developers in this space, who absolutely would rather it go forward. He has I don't want to say he has a personal take on wanting licenses to continue, because honestly I don't know. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he uses licensed software, maybe he doesn't. I have no idea. But to say that people don't know what a license is, that's why they're fucking doing an initiative against it, man. It's hard not to call them rude words. It is hard. What do you mean people don't know what a license is?
to most of their music on Spotify.
We're going to
They
go
have a
back on that
fundamental
Netflix comment, by the
misunderstanding
way.
of what a license is and how it works, which is
You
really
don't know what a license is, you don't know how it works. See his face.
really
Jeez,
funny when you consider the fact that people watch most of their movies and TV on Netflix and listen to most of their music on Spotify.
For reference, I don't. I have my own Plex server, have all my content that I buy legally ripped onto there, and I watch it through that method. When it comes to Netflix and stuff like that, I think this is a disingenuous argument because people complain all the time whenever stuff gets taken off of it. Libraries and things like Game Pass, Netflix, etc., will go to like such lengths as to give you a section which says, by the way, this is leaving soon, watch it before it runs out because we only have a license deal for 6 months. There's big massive deals about things like The Office and Friends. Platforms will fight over each other to get this content. People will leave and join other platforms because of it. No. I'm using Theo's tactics now. No, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is a big deal.
At
I
any
agree with that
point
other
in time,
commenter.
any of that media can be pulled, and you don't care. But when you
We do care. We do care. He is talking out of his butt.
spend a bunch of money on microtransactions in a dead game, then you get really mad. Or when you bought a game 10 years ago, haven't played it for 8 of those 10 years, and then Ubisoft realizes it's too expensive to maintain because the servers are being abused, and they decide to pull it. Also, if they're having issues relicensing the cars because the game's been out for 10 years, and to continue to distribute it means they have to pay massive license fees.
Poor company, poor private company, poor company that made these decisions when they were first building the software. Why is it the consumer's fault? He should be on our side. What is going on? These studios, when they were making the crew, looked at the agreements for the licenses for the cars for 10 years and said, yes, we're going to do that. Are we going to inform the customer of that? No, we're not. They actively made that decision to mislead the customer that this game would have lasted a long time. They did. And people like Thor and Theo and Primeagens will agree with that because they will say the button has to be changed to rent or to tell people that they're getting a license and this can be pulled for a certain amount of time. They'll agree with that, but they'll also not, and they'll make up these bullshit arguments in between it all.
For a game that has 8 to 10 players? Are you fucking insane?
Are you insane? Who's telling them to build software like this?
Like what? I respect.
You don't have to. Alright? Software developer, software engineer, call me whatever title you want. You don't, it does not have to be this way. These people are lying to you. It does not have to be this way.
Respect the hell out of Thor for being as diplomatic and polite in his video as he was, because all I can think when I read these comments and see what y'all think is, wow, gamers are fucking stupid. I don't want to be associated with you.
How bliss it must be to be this ignorant.
The fact that gamers and game devs are on opposite sides of things means that gamers are wrong.
Oh yeah. It's not me that's wrong. It's not devs that are wrong. It's the children that are wrong. You know that old Skinner meme? Like, I don't know what other take you can have on this. Game devs and gamers are on different sides of the fence on this. They've went on different paths. So the gamers need to shut up, need to be told that this is what they're going to accept. And game developers, who's listening to them? AAA studios are telling them to do whatever the hell they want them to. Who's actively pleased about building in microtransactions into games? It is applauded in the community when a game like Helldivers 2 does it correctly. It is hated in the community when a company like Blizzard puts in WoW tokens into the game, completely like taking away from the point of the whole experience. Do you think developers are happy about that? Do you think they like doing that? Or do you think developers and gamers are probably on the right path? I think Theo's on the wrong path, personally. I think gamers and game developers have been more aligned than ever, and they're all sick of it.
It doesn't mean that game devs don't understand them. It means gamers are entitled sacks of shit, and I'm tired of pretending they're not. To be clear, I don't mean gamers, people who play games. I mean gamers, people who make it their whole fucking identity. And I'm so done.
You see, he's just mad. That's all it is. This whole argument, I've at least went away and sourced things and looked up things, looked up lists and done this and looked at regulations. He's sitting here just getting mad. Blood pressure's raising because he just doesn't know what he's talking about. He's an ignorant man just spouting off abuse online. That's all he's doing. And we shouldn't support people like this. This is bridge burning. We should not be supporting people like this. I'm sorry.
I am so fucking done. I don't care what bridges this burns. I don't care how mad people are at me for it. I don't care how many Reddit threads are about to come at me for saying these things. Gamers are the problem in gaming, not game devs. If you hate microtransactions and you hate live service games, stop fucking playing them. If you hate when a game gets rug pulled, stop buying games from that studio. If you want your games to be out for longer and not get...
In other words, we don't need regulations. Bring back gambling. For kids. Put it back in the coal mines. Who cares? Just don't support the practice.
Hold, spend more money on them, and stop buying them on Steam where there's a 30% cut. Move to GOG or Epic where the platform takes...
Move to Epic? What? Who's ever said this that was on the side of gamers or game developers?
less than 10%, and the game dev can actually make a goddamn living on it. If you...
Game devs can make a living on Steam. He's just wrong here. I'm sorry. They can. For the platform that Steam gives you, and the massive market that it does, and the tools that it gives you with the Steam matchmaking kits, which I think are all free to use actually. I don't think you need to even sell it on Steam. It's a good platform. I think Epic and its leadership have far too many worries, to be honest. The way they're going about with their certain game purchases and doing this and doing that. If you're sitting here talking about how you have to support certain studios and what they're doing and what their agenda is, you can't then say you should support Epic. It's one of the worst studios at the minute in terms of its PR with everybody. Just because they give you more money doesn't sweep all that under the rug, and you can tell the kind of brain he has if he thinks about money is the only thing that matters in this. And that's probably why he has such a wrong take on this, because money's all that matters, fuck the regulations and fuck the customers.
Actually want these games to survive, you're going about it the worst possible way. I care a lot about game preservation. You can look at my videos about Nintendo on this channel if you want proof of that. It is so important that we find ways to preserve these art pieces in a way that I can share them with my kids. The fact that I can't show some of the best experiences I've had to my children without showing them a video of it is genuinely sad. And I can understand why we're being so upset about that. But we don't solve the problem by making lives harder for game devs. We solve the problem by having a conversation, finding better ways to push and communicate and build these things.
And his response to that is to call people stupid and say a bunch of things that are factually false. Like, he can respond to my video and call me out on anything I've said. I don't think he can though. Again, I have a research doc with everything cited and everything and going through everything. I might have one point in here that I need to clarify where I might have said TF2 is a free-to-play game, hence it wouldn't be caught up in this legislation, but it would be, and that's because of the microtransactions that come along with it.
And having a more understanding back and forth between the gamers in the game devs. But that's not what we're having right now. What we have right now is a bunch of entitled gamers yelling at game devs that are making games they don't even like or play for not magically snapping their fingers and making all the things they want appear. And this is always how it goes, every fucking time. And I'm tired of it. I really am. Probably never gonna talk about something like this again. I already know how toxic it's going to be. But y'all hurt me. I still can't comprehend the things I've seen being said about this. And that someone that
Can't comprehend it because doesn't understand it. Self-report, man.
was so universally loved as Thor could be torn to shreds for saying something so obviously true.
He's universally loved, but there's a lot of people that are starting to go against him for what I think are quite reasonable reasons. Just kind of about how smug he can be, his ego, that sort of thing, so whenever he's just wanting to certain things. I think you get that with the amount of experience you've had. Maybe it just needs to be brought down a peg, though. That's all.
Gamers, use your goddamn brains. Take a second to think about what Thor actually said. And if you are going to leave a rude comment here, watch his video one more time before doing it and try your hardest to actually listen. I promise you, as a lifelong gamer myself, every word of what he said has the same goal that you do.
It's just condescending, isn't it? That's all he has. Condescension, ad hominem attacks, and just railing up everybody.
To preserve gaming as an art and make it so
It's
that
just the
gamers
attack
can
dog,
have incredible
unfortunately.
experiences for the rest of time. If you feel otherwise, I don't know how to say it other than you're wrong, you're entitled, and you need to take some time to really listen. Till next time, peace, nerds.
Alright, we're going to go into some other gamers.
Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and I think it goes without saying that I love video gaming. And about a couple months ago, I made a video where I said I would just sue Ubisoft because it was all about The Crew, a video game that was this massive online live service racing title that released in 2014, got shut down a decade later. But yeah, the more and more I research into it, obviously there is nuance, and I think ultimately the heart is in the right place for Stop Killing Games. I really do believe so. And even if it is very vague, again, the heart is in the right place, and
Well, I think it's fair to say that we have Muta on side, so I will go with that. Mutahar is someone I've watched every now and then. I'll give him a subscribe. At the end of the day, I'll give him a like as well because, yeah, top notch. He talks a little bit there about the wording being better on the box, and I think he eventually comes back around to the same conclusion everyone else has, that the initiative is just trying to do what's best for gamers, and everyone's heart is in the right place. I think he's kind of hit the nail on the head there. Is that people just try to do good. I think people at foreign are overthinking the absolute shit out of it. And you'll see through my video going back now. I hope I've sort of explained that in a very good sort of way. I've sort of went point by point for every video, for every point that I've ever made, and kind of talked you through what I think should happen, essentially. Agree with him. I don't necessarily have anything to say about that. At the end of the day, when you have someone that kind of believes in the same things you do, you're not really going to have much to say about it. Unless you feel, then you'll get on the online, you'll go in the comments, and you'll start calling people stupid, which is, it's an approach. I don't necessarily believe in that approach. But that's it. Thank you all for watching this video on the Three Horsemen. Let me know if you want to see other videos quite like this. I don't think I'll add much more to this unless one of them literally watches this and replies to it. I think there's too much in this video for me to necessarily now respond to anything else. I think I've set it up quite well. I think we've made a pretty good solid case that a lot of them haven't done any research into this. The overarching conclusion, let's talk about the conclusion, right? Let's do that. Let's talk about the conclusion of this video and what it means. If you're skipping to this part here, this is all you need to know. Content creators, for years now, have been reacting to content and not doing proper research. They will watch a video, they will look at a website, they will react to an image, they'll react to a tweet, and just fire neurons off regarding whatever it is that they have locked in their head. They'll just start talking about things that they might not understand, and as a most part, everyone gets misinformed. The problem that I'm bringing up today is developers, and especially these three guys, are quite well respected in the developer community. They each have their own baggage in terms of haters, but for the most part, they have a lot of subscribers, about 3 million, all of them combined, Pirate Software being the biggest one. And I don't think it's good a creator of that size and magnitude gets on a soapbox and just starts raw dog reacting to things that patently isn't true. It provably isn't true. It factually isn't true. And the only way you can really respond back to that, as they did in their second videos if they made them, was to just change the narrative and bring up another point about this, that, and whatever. Like, again, it's just so easily disproven, and they use evidence that doesn't support the narrative whatsoever. So there's that. At its core point, I think React developer-based content does not have a place in this section of YouTube. Unfortunately, I think if you're talking about a matter, again, we're getting to the nuance of it, because you would expect these guys to come at it from an angle that actually makes sense because they're all in the industry. But unfortunately, they're some of the only three that have managed to disagree with the majority. Gamers and game developers alike. I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I'm calling for the end of all React content. What I'm calling for is better research and documentation into the things that we do. So my video, I record all of my research. I have myself making threads on Reddit to go through dedicated server licensing. I have recordings of myself going through legislation that goes over licensing models and copyright law. I have videos of myself going through draft bills to see how things are along, or how this process is done, how that process is done. And I don't get any of that from them. Even though they live stream like a lot of hours of the day, I don't see a lot of research from them. Prime was the only one I seen do research, and even then it was like half a page. Didn't actually look through much of what it was that was discussed, unfortunately. I think we can all do better. And if this video serves as anything, it's not a go and attack them, they're bad people. We need to do better. They have a very big voice in this industry, they have a very big voice in this community, and they can do better with it. I'm not saying that Thor has to change his position on any of this. I'm saying he has to get a position. Like he can't keep the current position he has with the current evidence he's supplied. It doesn't work. I'm saying that Prime is probably the only one that actually has a solution that I somewhat agree with. I then think going on Twitter and completely going back on yourself, as Thor did with asset preservation and making the distinction between social game preservation, was completely loony. Like, completely misunderstanding what everyone's talking about and has been talking about for the past decade now. As Muta said, this is course correction over things that have been happening for a long time. Somehow Muta and me and other content creators get that, but the guy in the industry who's been there for 20 years doesn't. And that's a problem. He's the biggest voice in it, and he needs to know better. And as for Theo, I don't really have much to say on that topic. I think his reaction to the whole thing was, in the words of Thor, quite disgusting. So that's it for me, guys. That's another Brohammer video. Thank you so much if you're stuck to the end of this. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Especially subscribe, because so many of you aren't. I got thousands of views and only 200 subs. I'm very, very grateful for all of the words and kindness and whatever else in debate that you've said down below. I hope this is a well-received third part to this somewhat trilogy. That'll be it from me. Have a good one, and I'll see you all in the non-drama fueled next one. Thank you very much.